Good evening, model railroaders, and welcome back to the Second Section podcast, where it's just a bunch of regular guys talking about model railroading. I am your host, Andy Dorsch. Sorry about the late start, folks, but we had a crew change. Had a crew change. audio issues, technical difficulties, and that's what you get here with the first-rate production at the Second Section. Joining me tonight is my co-host Mike Ostertag. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Why does it feel like 2 weeks has been like 2 months? This has been like the longest 2 weeks.
It has been a really long 2 weeks, but it's good to be back. Good to be back in the studio.
Yeah, we got kind of a little marathon run coming here.
We do. June's going to be a busy month for us.
June is a busy month.
We got Marty, and then Mike Rose is going to be back with us, and then after that, we'll have Lance Minheim on the show. So, speaking of Marty,
hi, Marty.
Marty McGurik is joining us this evening. Welcome to the Second Section podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
Great. It's Tuesday.
I love hearing those Wisconsin accents.
It's.
Oh, we don't have an accent. What are you talking about?
Don't you know?
Oh no, you don't.
No, not at all.
Yeah, very good. So, Marty, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I do want to, if you guys haven't caught Marty's interview, it just released last week with the Around the Layout podcast. You and Ray Arnott had a really good discussion.
That was cool. That was
a good show.
Good show.
It's funny how, and you should check out the show at aroundthelayout.com. But it was just really cool to hear your story and really answering the why with model railroading and your long tenure in the hobby. So, yeah, it was a really fun show. So
some would say too long of a tenure in the hobby.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Well, I don't know about that.
So
if you're in the hobby for more than 5 minutes, you might be in there too long.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Marty, could you give us a bit of a brief intro about yourself to our audience here, for those who don't know who Marty McGurik is, and your modeling interests and your model railroad?
All right. Well, I grew up in southern New England, specifically Connecticut, although we spent a lot of summers in Vermont. And that's probably the source of, as I talked to Ray, it's probably the source of my interest in the Central Vermont. So always been a model railroader since I was a kid. Started with Lionel, ended up with HO 4x8s, etc., and then did a brief stint in N scale when I went out to Wisconsin and was on the staff of Model Railroader for a few years.
Wow!
And then I moved to Colorado, and one thing we didn't hit on when I talked to Ray was I was actually an S scaler very briefly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
But it wasn't like S scale, it was SN3. But I had
in
Colorado. I figured if you're going to model, if you live in Colorado, you got to model narrow gauge.
You have to do narrow gauge.
I had an SN3 layout, and DNRGW layout was actually on the. We ended up with it on one of the national narrow gauge convention tours, and then in 2005, I took a job here in the DC area, and we moved here. I've been working at the same job basically ever since, and built a large double-deck HO scale layout based on the Central Vermont. I kind of ran home when we came out here, and based on the Central Vermont's main line, essentially the northern mainline division. When the opportunity came to build a new house about 7 miles from our old house, I tore that layout down and we moved here, and I started the current layout I have, which is based on the Central Vermont's Richmond Branch, which I'll probably share way more than anybody wants to know about the Richmond Branch in a few minutes, so I won't belabor that point. I've written a few books over the years for Kalmbach that are still in print, and starting with the very first issue of Model Railroad Hobbyist, I've been one of the Getting Real columnists in Model Railroad Hobbyist. So a thing that rotates between myself, Mike Rose, for a while enough, and so we each take a turn every month doing a different getting real column, which is essentially the prototype modeling column.
There's no names in that list, is there?
Yeah.
That's
I'm the schmuck. I'm the schmuck.
whoa. I don't know about that. But that is one of my favorite columns, month to month in that magazine, is the Getting Real, because it's always chock full of just fantastic information, not just about the prototype, but how you bring that to life through modeling. It's always fantastic.
Yeah, no, I enjoy writing it. Some months it seems like the deadline comes up, and one of the challenges I've had with it is I've been doing so much of the same stuff over the last couple of years that it's coming up with a topic that's different is a little hard. You can't keep writing articles about benchwork and scenery. So
Yeah, that's good. So, well, welcome to the show, Marty. So tonight what are we gonna talk about this evening? You're gonna share your layout with us, if that's right, correct?
yeah, I can certainly do that.
Okay. And while Marty gets the show put up, I do want to just make mention that the second section is on Patreon now, and this show is brought to you by our members. You can check us out at the Second Section podcast on Patreon. So we're going to roll the members of the dispatcher crew, and for $5 you guys can join that as well. So take a look and see who's all joined up on the Second Section dispatcher. So there we go. We got about 20 some members now, and it's growing every day. So thank you to all of you who support the Second Section. It's really been a humbling experience to see how many of y'all really love what we're putting on here. So thank you very much. So back to our regularly scheduled program here. Marty, we're present. So you'll be talking about the Central Vermont this evening, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then just let me know when you get the screen share up. But we do have quite a few guests with us this evening in the section crew lounge. Let's say we got about 90 to 100. Make sure that you guys are liking and subscribing to the channel. And then on top of it, just remember, let's keep it civil tonight. I do have moderators out in the chat. They're the ones with the little blue wrenches. If you guys are getting unruly, we'll have to have them dispatch you from this evening's show tonight. So looks like Marty, we're up on screen here.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and we'll tear down the banner here for the second section so you guys can get full screen here. There we go. And then can you zoom in just a hair bear on that or do like a full screen?
Sure. Hang on.
We should be good to go.
How's that?
That's beautiful.
Look at that. More mediocre scenery. Jeez,
more mediocre and very
come
inspiring
on.
scenery.
Seriously, we could just stop right now and do a whole show on this one slide alone.
Well, why don't we let Marty take a crack at it?
Good Lord.
Sure. Well, this, like I said, the layout is based on the HO scale, or it's based on the full scale Richmond Branch. It's an HO scale layout. So just to kind of clarify that for everybody, I'll talk a little bit more about what size it is and how it fits in the room and stuff in a minute. And as you can tell, it's really set during the late steam era, essentially. Although I do occasionally run internal combustion engines. My dark, dirty secret is I'll run any kind of Central Vermont engine I have down here, and when people aren't looking. But I tell people it's essentially set in the immediate post-World War II years. So that's what 1948 is really sort of the target-ish date. there's some variation from that in some of the cars and some of the locomotives, but it's basically within a 5-year window around that.
Yeah.
I realized I didn't have any slide that said what year I'm modeling, so I figured I'd tell everybody. It should
that's
be
good.
obvious based on this, but so the Central Vermont is essentially, it bisects the southern New England. It starts at the Canadian border where you see that blue circle on the left-hand side there, and runs from St. Albans, Vermont, where it has its major shops and yard facilities, and then runs straight down through the state of Vermont. Ends up along the Connecticut River in a point called White River Junction, and then it runs south along the Connecticut River essentially until it ends up along the Thames River in New London, Connecticut. And in the 1920s, it was acquired by the Canadian National as an access to a warm water port. So people from, South Carolina might not think of New London, Connecticut as a warm water port, but essentially it's a port that doesn't freeze during the winter. And at that point, the Canadians had not finished the St. Lawrence Seaway, so they needed access to warm water ports. And so the CN bought 2 railroads that ran through New England, the CV that ran north-south, and then another railroad called the Grand Trunk NER, Grand Trunk New England lines, that ran essentially east through the state of Maine and ended up at Portland, Maine. And really, it's really incredible to think of Portland, Maine as a warm water port. The point of the railroad I'm modeling on this layout is within the blue circle there, and it's zoomed in on the right. You can see it a little better, and it's this little 26 or so mile branch that skirts the Canadian border. It's right up by Canada, and it starts in St. Albans Yard, actually right in the middle of Italy Yard in St. Albans, and it runs through the towns of Sheldon Springs, Sheldon Junction, Ennisburg Falls, East Berkshire, and Richford. And at Richford, it connects with the Canadian Pacific's line going towards Newport. And then it also connects in Sheldon, a place called Sheldon Junction, a railroad called the St. Johnsbury in Lamoille County, which later became the Lamoille County Railroad, crosses the CV, so they interchange with the Central Vermont and then in Sheldon Junction. So why this branch? Well, when I started doing this, based on some conversations I had with my layout designer, I wanted to make sure that I had a project that was achievable. And if you want to hear a lot about that, you can listen to the podcast I did with Ray. But I wanted an achievable project. So even though I have a layout room that's about the same space as that mainline layout was, I wanted to basically not overwhelm myself, essentially, for lack of a better term. And so I chose a branch. I wanted to look for a branch line, and the Central Vermont only has a couple of branch lines. One of them ends up in Burlington, Vermont, where it interchanges with Rutland, and I considered that. The problem there is that's a lot of big city brick structures and a lot of structure modeling and city modeling, and that's just not my forte. I really prefer modeling equipment and rolling stock and scenery. So I had discovered this branch a number of years ago when I went rail fanning up in Vermont, and even then it was kind of an interesting stretch of railroad. And it has a couple of things that a lot of typical stub-ended or dead-ended branches don't necessarily have. One is, like I said before, it has a couple of interchanges with 2 different railroads, both of which are really interesting railroads. It's got a large paper mill on it, which was nice because it has one large source of traffic. It's got creameries, and when you model New England in the steam era, you have to have creameries or you're just not doing it right. And then it has a...
That's true.
Yeah.
And then in Richford, it has there was another large industry that was a plywood plant. And so I thought that was kind of a neat thing, although that's proved to be elusive to find pictures of it because the damn thing burned down in 1954. So it's been really difficult to find photos of it, but I found a couple, enough to at least get started on planning a model.
That's cool.
And this was not short little 4 or 5 car branch line trains. As you can tell here, there's actually 2 N5A consolidations on this train. You can see the smoke on the behind the building on the left.
Wow.
So this is probably a 30 car train, 30 or 40 car train. And out of St. Albans, it climbs an incredibly tight little grade. It's like a 3.5% grade climbing out of St. Albans. And then once it gets up on the hill here, once it gets over that, it kind of tends to coast for a little while, and then there's another 1.5% grade going into Richmond itself. It was very frequent, and I don't have a picture of it right now, but it was not uncommon for the St. Albans yard switcher, which was either an 080 in the steam era or a Alco S2 or S4 in the early diesel era, to push the two steam locomotives up the hill too. So they would be on the back of the van, back of the caboose, and you'd have the two steamers spread like this, and then the diesel would push to get it over that first hill, and then it would cut off on the fly. So there was numerous examples of that.
So Marty, that engine on the back of the train, that's not a helper. That's basically like distributed power
exactly
on this train.
In 1948.
Yeah. Well, this is probably 1956, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, based on the paint schemes on the freight cars, this is probably 1956.
That is that's a really interesting type of little operation you could do with a layout, especially with DCC nowadays and the things you could do with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I found, Mike, is that the lead set of cars is the local cars, or the shorts, right? They're the ones going to the paper mill, or a couple of the two towns that are on the branch that have industrial sidings. And then the cars behind the second locomotive are probably the cars that are just going right to the Canadian Pacific.
Wow.
Somebody told me that's how this worked back then. I have never found paperwork that confirmed it, but it seems logical to me.
So was the rear engine then turned so it was tender against the cars, or was it facing the same direction as facing the same direction as the lead unit?
Yeah, it's facing the same direction.
Oh, so basically they're just taking two trains in all at one time, right?
Right, and you can tell it's running as an extra too.
That is so cool.
Based on the white flags, so it's running as an extra. The whole railroad was timetable and train order until they went to track warrant in 1966. So this is old-fashioned railroading up there, and yeah. So anyway, I thought that was kind of neat, and pay attention to what these locomotives look like, because this is the standard power on this railroad from like 1949 on. Until we got to the diesel era in 1957. So the other class of locomotive, that was what we called the N5A class 280s. They had 63-inch drivers. The other class of engines were the M3A class. I have no idea why one was N and one was M, except for the driver size probably. And these had 57-inch drivers. And these had all but one of these locomotives in this class. There were 6 of them. One had Alesco feed water heaters, which is kind of the tank that's in front of the stack there that you might have seen in other steam locomotives.
Yeah.
I don't know how much into steam engines you guys are, but anyway, this is the coffin feed water heater design, and this creates a face on a locomotive that only a mother could love. And so these ran occasionally on the Richmond Branch. They ran very regularly, sort of in the pre-war era, and then pre-World War II era, and then up starting in like 1948 or 49. The N5s the bigger consolidations got bumped from the mainline trains, and they ended up on the branch, and these guys got bumped into work service or sent to the Southern Division. But this is a brass model. This is one of my brass models. It's actually posed on Paul Dolkus's old Boston and Maine layout.
So that's the feed water. I don't know anything much about steam except for they look cool. That's all I know. So the feed water goes over the headlights, right? That's where
the hooded thing over the headlights is the feed water heater, right?
That's pretty neat.
Wow, that's cool.
I'm gonna learn so much tonight.
I love steam.
So here's a picture of this. Actually, engine has just come back from the Richmond Branch. It's run on the Richmond Branch. This is one of the N5A consolidations, and this was taken in probably, I think this photo dated to like March 10th of 1957, which means that within 30 days, this engine will basically be razor blades.
Oh.
Everything, yeah. The way the Central Vermont dieselized, the Jeep 9s arrived in mid-March of 1937 or 1957. I'm sorry, 1937, 1957, and they literally dieselized the railroad overnight. I mean, they got 26 Jeep 9s within a couple of days of each other, and they just dropped all the steam engines.
Wow.
Right away. There was no time period where the steam engines ran with the Jeep 9s regularly. There were a couple of occasions where you might have seen a steam engine go by on a train that one day and the diesel the next, but then the next day it would be all diesels. So you can build one of these. You can get those engines in brass. They're all been available in brass, so they're remarkably hard to find. But if you really want one of these engines, you could build one. And you can start with a Bachmann 280, which is kind of based on an Illinois Central prototype. And if you cut away everything that from the Illinois Central engine that doesn't look like a CV engine and then stick all the parts back on that do, this is what you end up with.
Wow.
That's remarkable. That's really pretty. With the brass on
I
it,
really hated painting this thing, honestly.
I bet.
I really didn't want to paint it. This is the one that Ian Rice, who was a longtime MR author and a good friend of mine, and well known for track plans, but Ian was actually a really, really good modeler. And he is actually the one who built this particular model. I built another one after this using his guidance. And then for the big layout, when I had to run, and I needed like 6 or 8 consolidations, we just took standard Bachmann consolidations and put Central Vermont or Southern New England decals on them, and we're done with it. This was a lot of work. But they're really cool. I have since acquired a couple of brass ones. I still need to put decoders and paint them. And really putting a sound decoder in a brass steam locomotive is something that's on the outer limits of my capabilities right now. Or quite honestly, what it is, I'm worried I'm going to screw it up.
I doubt that. But
And then like I said, in 1957, the Jeep 9s arrived, and these became the standard power on the Richmond Branch, but it would just be one engine on a train. They had 2 flavors of Jeep 9s. They had the torpedo boat ones that were used with the air tanks on the roof that were used for passenger service, and then they had these guys that were the 4500s that were used for the freights. Athearn did one of these a couple of years ago. They did a fairly good job on the paint scheme. They had a couple of detail errors they made on it, but those are fixable. So if you wanted to model the Richmond Branch or the CV in the kind of the late steam era, 1950s era, and didn't have steam locomotives, this would be a good way to start.
So we do have a question.
Sure.
So Paul August is asking, any reason why they chose the Jeep 9s over the Jeep 7s, or?
Yeah, I think the answer to that, I don't know, but I think the answer to that is they didn't dieselize. They dieselized so late that I don't even think EMD was offering Jeep 7s at the time, or they were certainly
that
offering
makes a lot
both.
that makes sense.
Yeah, they were certainly offering both. The Central Vermont was the last railroad in the Northeast to dieselize. So there's a lot of pictures of steam trains on the Central Vermont in early 1957 because all the rail fans went up there to photograph it.
Oh, I bet.
So there's a ton of pictures of it. And so so that's the reason I think that they probably went with the Jeep 9s. They also never had F units or hood units or anything. They ran on the mainline trains, ran Canadian National diesels since 1951 to 1957. And I'm trying not to like CV geek out here, but anyway.
No,
go ahead.
Please do.
When they did. They really dieselized. They would occasionally run, train masters, and they'd run. It essentially was like a laboratory for every Canadian National diesel. They'd run FAAs, and they'd run train masters, and they would run F units. But the main thing they dieselized with in 1951 was the through freights, the long distance freights, were dieselized with Canadian National sea liners.
Oh,
Fairbanks more
Fairbanks more
sea-liners.
sea liners. Yeah.
Yeah. And which is why I'm like one of the few people in the world that was truly excited about lifelike sea-liners, 20 years ago. Because I used to run, I probably got 6 sets of those things downstairs in the display case now. I still like them. I like to come out and run them when nobody's looking. And then in 1963, they did a big power swap among the Canadian National Family of Roads, and specifically the Grand Trunk and the CV and the Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific. And the CV ended up getting a number of these things that the crews used to just call these end cabs. And what these really are SW1200 RSs. So they're SW1200s, but they have that flex coil truck on them, which in my crappy photo you can't really see. But these are what I remember seeing running on the Richmond Branch. And these ran on the branch. Basically, they were the standard power on the branch, a pair of these or maybe 3 of these in a variety of paint schemes, including that delivery scheme I just showed you on the Jeep 9. They had that. They had this scheme was probably the most common. And then they also had the what we call the Larson scheme, which had the green pregnant tapeworm with the 2 big yellow bands going down it. So
did you just say pregnant tapeworm?
Yes, that's what the paint shop crews called the intertwined CV you see there.
Oh man, there was a question from Jerry Jackson earlier, Marty. The question was on the Jeeps. Did they run long hood forward since they just came from steam? Or
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they always ran long hood forward. The CV's first 2 road diesels that it got were a pair of RS3s in 1954. And those were set up to run long hood forward. So all the CV locomotives ran long hood forward, including the RS11s. So it was a Canadian It was a Canadian national standard, really.
Huh. Wow.
So when we moved into this house and I got the layout designed, I wanted to, went out right away and went to, painted the walls down here. You notice I just painted the upper half of the wall sky blue, and went to IKEA and bought my Benchwork. And my original intention, and this, we'll come back to this in a minute. My original intention was I stained all these shelves on the bottom because I was going to display all my models and all my other stuff. Right. And so I went through hours of effort sanding and staining these damn shelves. But essentially the layout framework is IKEA Ivar shelving.
Right.
With that I painted this dark green color, the greenish blue color it's actually a color called Riverway that my wife picked. And this was the first section I worked on. This is the layout's basically a donut on one side of the basement, and I'll show you a track plan in a minute. And then all I did is attach I built a standard grid of 1x3 lumber and just put that on top of the Ivar system, or screwed it to the Ivar shelves. And that's the basis of the layout. Essentially for this freestanding part, that's how I did it.
Now, did I spy? Oh, I'm sorry, Marty. Did I spy pocket holes there?
Yes.
Do you use a Craig jig or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's a Craig jig.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through a number of instances where the damn joists were always in the wrong place on the last layout. And when it's easy enough to deal with it when you're like on the aisle side and you can just unscrew the wood from the outside. But if you got it up against the wall, like I do here, and you want to move a joist, it's a considerably bigger exercise and frustration. Yeah. So this is the sort of the long wall in the place. And you notice by this point we've painted everything below the Benchwork, that dark fascia color, or that dark green color. Ultimately the fascia will be painted the same color. That's and really cool. I'll put this in here because I wanted to show, some people have asked, I didn't use Ivar shelving everywhere. It's not like solid Ivar shelving. What I did is had a set of Ivar shelves and then maybe build a bridge of the grid work. In this case, can you guys see my cursor? Can you see
No, I don't think
Probably
I can.
No.
Yeah, I put it against the wall over there, just kind of screw it in that corner of the wall and then ran it. And then there's another Ivar set to the left of this one. So along the 20-something foot wall, there's only like 3 Ivar sets. Wow. And that's and then it's obviously screwed to the wall also. And then this is what my wonderful display shelves ended up looking like. Right.
I was going to say, those don't look like very many finished models.
Yeah, no, it just became a repository of junquet. And so
Junquet.
junquet.
Fancy.
Junquet,
Yes.
that's
I'm
fancy.
writing that down.
Yeah, we have to say that with your pinky up now, remember?
And so one
French.
afternoon I came down here last summer, and through COVID, this is what it looked like. And of course, I was the only one seeing it, so it didn't bother me, right? And then and you can see how much progress I've made on the layout above it at this point. So obviously, this has been a while, and I decided that I could either clean the shelves or do something else about it, and I opted to do something else about it. So I just went out and got wainscoting and hit all that junk.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
So it's
that
all
actually is a cool
accessible
look.
from the it's all accessible from the other side. But this is what I call the viewing side of the layout, and all that will make sense in a minute. So that you can kind of see how it's a big donut.
That actually kind of really finishes off that part of the.
It really looks nice.
Yeah,
really
I
nice.
got total kudos for doing that from the household management. She was very thrilled that I did that. To this day, she hasn't gone around the corner and looked at the other side of it, so she doesn't know that all that junk is still in there. She just can't see it. In areas where it just was truly too narrow to mess with the Ivar shelving, there's some spots I have where the layout gets down to maybe 14 inches.
Oh, wow.
I use these wood shelf brackets that I also bought at IKEA, and I just put them on larger L brackets to secure them to the wall. I outsmarted myself a little bit there. It was very difficult to screw those things to the wall, so I simply screwed them to these 1x3 or 1x3 L's, and then screwed the 1x3 L's to the wall.
There you go.
And of course, those are painted also to blend into the lower part of the wall. There's a couple of spots, and I'll show them to you again, where the layout is freestanding, and there's one spot where it's freestanding, where one side of it is actually where the swing gate is to get into the inside of the layout. And in those spots, I had to come up with a better way to make sure I didn't want to screw it to the floor through our carpeting, or I tried to avoid that. So what I did is I bought these Ivar cabinets. One of the things IKEA sells are cabinets that actually sit in the Ivar shelf system, and I have hundreds of model railroad magazines, like all of us do, and so I just used the Ivar cabinets and I filled it with model railroad magazines as ballast, and basically, if somebody walked into that part of the layout, they'd bounce off it and fall to the floor, and the layout isn't going to move because it weighs a lot. And they hold up; they do well. And then you notice here that I have this is one of the two big peninsulas on the layout, and I just basically ran L girders down the side of the Ivar legs. That's how I supported those, and connected it to the around the wall section and the splice plate over there. And then it's just kind of conventional L girder benchwork. When all the L girders were in, before I put the plywood on, I actually took the legs where it stands proud of the top of the L girder, and I just sawed it off flush. Just
there you go.
Didn't need it there.
Yeah.
Now, so that's enough. That's enough pictures of benchwork. Here's one of our trains again. So this is another photo, and this is from February of 1957. I actually had the presence of mind to write the date on Stan's photograph.
Oh, wow.
So this is as the layout design looked when I got it from the layout designer. My friend Lance Mindheim designed this layout for me, and pretty much this is the footprint that it's been built. I mean, this is how it lays out in the basement. There's a couple of things that are different, and it's all on the top of the diagram here, where you see staging. That's not where the staging yard is. The staging yard is actually over to the right-hand side, where it's and calling it a staging yard is probably overselling it. It's a couple of staging tracks to the right-hand side there, and I can show you how that looks in a minute. But you come down the stairs, you see the stairs in the lower right-hand corner, and you go around the stairs, and then you walk up, and kind of your first view of the layout is where the yellow arrow is.
Yeah.
This gives you a better view of how it actually built out. So where the staging yard was on the top, that is now another town. And then to the right-hand side, you'll see two tracks that kind of run into the trees. And that is St. Albans. That's the west end of the branch. and then there's a pair of tracks to the left of that, and that is the Canadian Pacific interchange in Richmond. So basically, both ends of the layout starts and ends in the same spot. And those are connected together for continuous run because, ever since I was 8 years old, I like to run my trains around in circles.
Who doesn't?
But you
That's
don't
what I'm doing.
Jeez.
So
I don't even have a circle.
There's a couple of questions, Marty, if you'd be so kind. So David Winther asked, what's the overall footprint size of your layout?
Oh gosh. It's roughly the area where the staging yard is like 13 feet. If you took it from top to bottom, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 18 by, I think it's 18 by 34.
Wow, that's good size.
That's a pretty decent size layout. Holy cow.
And then Dundas Junction Model Railroad James asked, what's your minimum radius?
The mainline minimum is 36. The track, the tightest curve on the layout is the track going into the paper mill where it says Sheldon Springs there.
Yeah.
And that is 32. Well, the inside track I think is 30, but that's 32. And then the big curve going around the corner between the bridge and Sheldon Junction, what I call the alcove down there, that is a 46-inch radius curve.
Oh, that's big.
And I'm not running anything bigger than 280s.
Yeah. And then one last one. This is about the first picture that you showed. So Late Night Model Railroad says Sheldon is where that first photo he showed was taken, right?
Yes.
There you go. Good eye. Good eye, Late Night Model Railroad.
So when you go to operate this then, Marty, that continuous run, that switch, do you have something to where you like kind of quote unquote spike that switch so it can only go towards Richford, so that way you don't have the continuous run options? Do you run it like a point to point then?
Yeah, it runs like a point to point. Yeah, and the two tracks on the left, I have a slide that shows this a little better in a minute, but sure. The two tracks, the staging yard tracks all the way to the right are St. Albans. That's the other end of the line. So you start there essentially. Then you run into the layout and you run all the way around through Sheldon Junction and Ennisburg, and then you come up. And then actually the way Richford worked, and I don't think I have a prototype map of it in this presentation. I took it out. The way Richford worked is essentially the line came in, and then there was a track that forked off to the Central Vermont yard, which is what I'm modeling. And then the track actually continued on and crossed the Missisquoi River again, and then it ended up in downtown Richford, which is where the Canadian Pacific was. So I'm not modeling the Canadian Pacific stuff, so I just cut it back to those two tracks, and that's where I'm representing.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Now in the real world, there's actually a Y between that where it forks off to the CV yard and then heads toward the CP. There's actually a Y. And so the CV trains would go down there and then back around the Y and come around, which is how they ended up running locomotive first both ways on the branch. Way back, I found an old track map of Richford that showed it had a turntable there at one point with no Y. So that's what I duplicated here because we had a heck of a time getting a Y in here with my minimum radius. So this is what you see when you walk down in the basement. This is
wow.
It's a little cleaner today, but obviously you see Richford there in the middle is the broad expanse of plywood plains, and then the far wall you see what I'm calling Berkshire, and to the left there you can see the support post that holds up the rest of the house, or so I'm told, just barely to the left, and then sort of that alcove is beyond there. So we'll just kind of take a walk through this. So this is the staging yard, how it looks. So those two tracks in the foreground here with the New York Central boxcar on them and the tank cars are the Canadian Pacific and Richford. And then the two tracks in the back, one of them already has today's local is moved out and tomorrow's local is sitting there ready to go. That is St. Albans. So these two tracks are actually 25 miles apart. In theory.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting that picture was one of the first, because Andy and I were actually having a discussion with some people here earlier today about staging tracks and stuff like that. And that was a really cool example of how you can hide staging on the same level of a different part of your layout, is like a different usage, It is really cool the way you did that.
Yeah, I did that on one of my old layouts years ago. And what I find effective is the first thing I tried to do with that is I actually built like a hill board, like a piece of masonite, and cut it to shape and stuck it there, and nobody could see the staging tracks. So they didn't know if their train was moving. They didn't know which direction it was moving. Made them really nervous. This is what, like I call it, screen staging. So you can see the train kind of in among the trees, and it's pretty effective. And when you're looking at it from just looking at the layout, it just looks like there's a couple more yard tracks over there behind the trees. It's not obtrusive or it doesn't destroy the illusion, I guess is the best way to say it.
Right. Yeah, it's a really cool effect.
Yeah, this picture is taken like standing on a step stool. I mean, this is pretty high up. We have really tall ceilings in our basement. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Almost 10-foot ceilings. So
what?
Yeah.
And this is a single deck layout. How come you didn't go 3 or 4 decks? Come on.
You know how many people come down here and ask me that? You could have built a mushroom.
I actually applaud you for keeping it at a single deck. That's actually really, really cool.
All right. So this is, by the way, that Bachmann 280 conversion that Ian did that's been painted. So now it just looks like a steam locomotive. It doesn't look like an amazing modeling example. But as the trains come out of the staging tracks from St. Albans, it starts here and runs around this curve, and this is kind of where all those staging tracks join together, right? First place we hit is my representation of East Berkshire. I have very little information on what the town of East Berkshire looks like. If you look at the prototype map and the layout, you'll realize that I actually have my version of East Berkshire is in the wrong place. It's at the wrong end of the line, but that's okay because it's kind of where it fit. This was the area that we converted from the original staging yard to a town. And this building here is a prototype building. It's a scratch-built model of a cannery that was in Waterbury, Vermont. So it's a rescue from my old layout, but it seems to fit this spot pretty well. There's another shot of it running past the creamery or the cannery. I'm sorry. That's a really unusual thing on the left there. That's a truck dump. So that trucks would just back up there and raise their beds and dump stuff in the basement. I don't know what they're dumping in the basement. I'm not sure, but probably coal or some sort of vegetables. I'm not sure what it would be. They processed corn in the prototype building. That's what they did there. But
yeah, they probably just backed the corn trucks up to it and dumped it down into the pit.
Yeah. So this is how I'm putting Berkshire together. I call it Berkshire, not East Berkshire, because again, it's in the wrong place. You can see the cannery is in the back corner there on the right, and then the station is an actual model of a standard CV station. If the CV had 2 station designs that were fairly standard, this is the smaller wooden one, and so the Berkshire station looked like that. I do have photographs of that. Then we come around the corner, and then we end up at where the junction is to the paper mill peninsula, and you see the blue arrow there is roughly where this is. This has been kind of an interesting project. This is what I'm working on right now. The first thing I did is relayed all the track to this probably late last year, and replaced all the microengineering turnouts with hand-laid turnouts. And then in the background there, I had mentioned I had done an N-scale book for Kalmbach years ago, and one of the things I had on there was I did a project layout with a main central N-scale layout, and I ended up with this mill building, and it's a laser cut brick mill building based on one in Charlottesville, Virginia. But it's a really cool building, and each of those windows is 4 pieces. and there's a lot
Oh
of
my
them,
goodness.
and there's another side of them too. So there's a bunch of windows on that thing. So I never could bring myself to like pitch the thing or sell it at a swap meet for $10. So I was dorking around down here one day, and I took a look at it, and I said, what if I put that in like in the background as like a background building? Would that work? And so I shoved it back there, and I put a mill stream in front of it and did a couple other things, and it kind of sat like that for a little more than a year. And I was about to take it out, and a couple of my friends said, no, you can't take that out. You gotta keep that thing there. So I said, well, what it needs to do is get set into the scene a little better. And so the first thing I
Oh,
did
yeah.
is take, and I added a road, and there was a real road in Sheldon Junction. I showed you that the picture of the SW 1200 with the wiggly worm that was taken in Sheldon Junction. And so I added a road, and of course I had to cut the roads off in logical spots at the wall. And the river scene that you see there, it actually ends in a mirror on the left, and then it goes under a small half N scale covered bridge that you can barely see the roof on the right hand side.
Huh.
And that's, so there's like a half N scale building, an N scale building, and I thought what it really needs is to be, forced perspective is great, but you've got to kind of put it in context, and you've got to put a full scale element in front of it to kind of complete the illusion. So I had a store that I had built years ago, just a typical New England country store. And so I plopped that down on the layout, and I thought, hey, this is starting to look like something, but it's still, the brick wall is just still too blank. It's just kind of jumping out at me. So I need to do something else with it. So then I just took a few trees and stuck it in
Oh,
front
there
of
you
it
go.
and helped plant it in place there. So that's as it looks right now. I'm pretty pleased with how this is looking. Obviously, it needs the static grass and the dirt, and the road is, needs to be, the road is just a gray piece of cardboard right now. It needs a little dressing up, but
Sure.
uh,
There's a couple of questions, Marty. Glenn Fricks was asking, what type of problems did you have with microengineering turnouts that drove you to the hand laid turnouts instead?
those ones had a couple of problems. The first thing was the throw bars were way too tight. The other problem I had is that the frogs were higher than the stock rails, so things would run over them, and especially anything with like the RP20 or RP88 wheels,
They jump, right?
they jump, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just easier to just replace them. And then there was a couple of places where the geometry made more sense to not use microengineering turnouts there.
Yeah. So this one that you see right here on my layout, that's always in the scene here. I have the same problem. The frog is higher than the stock enclosure rails, so I have to be careful and watch them jump. So
Yeah, I talked to some folks about that, and they said, well, just file them down. And one of them, I filed it down so much that there was like no flange left in it. There was no,
right, yeah,
there's no trough.
They're
for the
really
wheel
that
left.
high?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
they were really high.
It's probably, mine on this one is a 32nd of an inch.
Yeah,
It's, I mean, you rub your finger over it, it is significant. Next time you're down in my basement, Mike, I'll show you.
Yeah,
definitely. It's almost like they took a code 83 frog and put it on a code 70 rail. So
yeah,
and all my I should say this, all the track is code 70.
okay.
I tried playing around with code 55 and just, I don't know if I'm probably too ham-handed for it or something, but it was just yeah,
Greasy meat hands.
too much. Greasy meat hands.
Yeah, Marty, quick one other. There's two other questions about operations. So Tom Klamoski and Tim Moran both have questions for operations. Do you get into the operations of the layout later in your presentation?
A little bit, not much.
Okay, well then maybe what I'll do is I'll ask him now here before I have to write any more down. So Tom Klamoski was going to ask, when you have operating sessions, how many how many people do you have down there at a time?
Usually one.
One.
Me.
Oh boy.
Layout for one.
Well, now in fairness, it's because, I really built this thing. I started it right, a year before COVID. And then essentially I play with it all the time. I mean, I run the trains down here all the time. But I have had other people come over and operate it. I shouldn't say it that way. It's designed the way I've got it set up is there's the Richford local crew, which is 2 people, and then there's the mill job, which would switch this peninsula here, and they'll come out of staging and switch this peninsula, and then so that's 4 people, so it's 2 2-man crews.
That's
and
awesome.
then I kind of run trains as I want to. If I want to run an extra or a second freight or something, that's what I'll do. Typically what I'll do is if it's enough people here, I'll set up a train that will be the local that switches all the industries, and then instead of running 2 engines on the train and have that whole split thing we talked about with the Canadian Pacific block of cars, I'll just run a second train as a Canadian Pacific connection train.
Okay.
I've tried it both ways, and it works out. It seems to work out better with another train. People get real nervous running like double-headed trains, and it's a little difficult if you don't really pay attention to it.
I can imagine.
Yeah, things even with these kind of curves, things string line, and they buckle and stuff like that. So, and most of my rolling stock are resin kits that I built. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So I really don't want a whole lot of those and very expensive brass engines, and so I really don't want those things on the floor. So.
Don't want the 050 getting at them either, right?
Yeah. So so we throw all the turnouts with tortoise switch motors.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't do the hand throw turnouts because number one, it's a little difficult because there's a lot of places you have to reach in too much, and then it's also because they're steam locomotives. Some of them have already been equipped with decoders and not equipped with keep alives, and really you need to have powered frogs or keep alives in a brass steam engine. Ideally you need both, but you can get by without the keep alives if you have powered frogs. So that's the reason I do that. If I was running all 4-axle diesels, I would throw the turnouts by hand and not power the frogs, frankly. But and that's just based on experience running the Jeep 9s and stuff down here. I've got 3 or 4 of the Athearn Jeep 9s, and they run just fine without any help. The steamers sometimes they find every bit of dirt and stuff in the track. So anyway, this is the paper mill peninsula. What you see, the trench in front of you here, is actually the intakes. That eventually there'll be a brick building right in front of us, and it'll be kind of overhanging the intakes, and that's where the intakes are to the mill runs and the mill race itself. And the pulpwood piles will be to the left, and then the mill buildings are to the right. And they're actually arranged like this. They're kind of down a steep hill going towards the water. So and the thing on the right hand side here is the largest laser cut building I've ever laser cut. This is the main mill building, and then this is what the prototype looked like.
Holy cow!
And so
that's
you can
cool.
see how
that is such a neat building.
You can see where the boxcar is on the top. This looks like a South River Model Works kit or a Fine Scale Miniatures kit.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about this is this building is still there. It's kind of buried in this massive complex, but it is still there. And specifically the tower and that ramp that goes out to the tracks. So that's where they would actually take the pulpwood from the cars up on that little cupola on the top there and run it down the conveyor belt and then drop it down an elevator into the mill building itself.
So that tower is just an elevator?
Yeah.
That is so cool.
And so this is what the building kind of looks like in position on the layout. And there's a whole bunch of windows on there, all of which are laser cut. And then I'm in the process of putting them together, and then I'll paint it. But the tower will be sticking up right here on the left and hand side and go across the tracks.
Okay.
Then we leave Sheldon Junction, and we're back out in the countryside. And one thing I wanted to do with this, really, if you think about it, the layout is essentially 3 or 4 switching layouts, the shelf layouts kind of stuck together with some open country running in the middle. And this is one of those open country running areas. And then we get to this scene is actually a scene I salvaged from my old layout. This is the one piece of the old layout I kept. And this is based the bridge and the abutments and everything else. You notice how they have stone on the bottom and concrete on the top. That's very common. That's very common in the Northeast. This is based on a prototype on the Central Vermont. A number of prototype photos I found of this bridge on the CV, and I sent them to Russell Green at New England Brownstone, and he was nice enough to basically make the abutments and the piers for me. And the two abutments, you don't see the other one here, obviously, but the two abutments are not the same. And so it's a prototype CV bridge. The only problem is it's about 150 miles south of where I'm actually modeling it, but I liked it too much and I kept it. So, and then the building in the background there is another Vermont building that is not along the branch, but it is about 70 miles southeast of this location. That is something typically called Ben Thresher's Mill. And it was one of the last water-powered woodworking mills in New England.
Wow.
And if you want to see a crazy old classic Vermonter, you can go on YouTube and Google or look for Ben Thresher's Mill. And it's like a 45-minute PBS documentary that was made in the 70s. And you get to meet this guy, and he was a trip. I mean, it's really fun. I mean, it's great to watch. The little raw wood section you see there in the front is a blacksmith shop. But what I don't have modeled on this is when they show it on that video and he goes in his blacksmith shop and lights the forge, he's basically up to his hips in sawdust and wood shavings. And he just lights this forge, and he's in there hammering away, and there's sparks flying there. How that thing didn't burn down 50 times, I don't know. It didn't. It's still there, and it's actually been completely restored.
Wow.
But it's still there. But I just thought it was a really neat building. So that is one that a Craftsman kit manufacturer was going to make as a kit. I helped him work on the design. He sent me a set of parts for the pilot model, and I don't think he ever released the kit. But it's a cool building. That the RS3 running across the bridge is the new Bowser RS3, which is rapidly becoming my favorite locomotive to run.
Wow.
So we got. Can we take a little time out? Can we take a little time out here, Marty, about the RS3 from Bowser? I think you're another person that is in absolute love with this locomotive. What's your favorite thing about it?
It looks great. It has nice weight, and I've been in the hobby long enough to remember that, a good locomotive has some good heft to it. The details are spot on. Some people have complained about the color a little bit. I personally think it looks pretty good for a brand new engine. Maybe I'm wrong, but it looks good to me. They got all the colors right. Okay, so typically when people do CV engines, the few times they've done them, they paint the walkways green. The walkways should be black. Or they paint the pilots green. The pilot should be black. So they got all that stuff right. I looked at this thing, and I have to say that I can't find a single detail to put on this thing. I mean, they even got the damn marker lights on it. And so, the class lights. And so it's just.
I love the fact that they're adding those little details now.
And they're road specific. I mean, Central Vermont got 2 of these in the same order. Grand Trunk, New England, the railroad in Maine we were talking about a minute ago, got 2 of them. So they were basically numbered sequentially. They were painted exactly the same, except obviously the Grand Trunk one said Grand Trunk on the side. And the difference was the CVs were set up for passenger service, so they had steam generators. And the Grand Trunks were not passenger engines; they had dynamic brakes, and they put that on each one of those. I mean, it fits. They've got the winterization hatches on them. They've got everything on them. So they got the right horn and the right horn bracket. I mean, it's just.
Did any of those?
And they run wonderful. I mean,
they're good runners too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did nothing to this but assign the decoder the locomotive number and turn down the master volume because of course it's too loud like they always are. I did nothing else to it, and it starts nicely. It creeps along. It runs. It's smooth. It slows when you turn the throttle off. It coasts. Just enough. It's not like crazy coasting, but it coasts enough. So, yeah. So it's been great. I actually bought 2 of these damn things. I ordered them in 2016 for my old layout because they were going to be the standard passenger power on the old layout, and I actually forgot I ordered them until the hobby shop guy called me and said, "Hey, I got 2 of these things sitting in here for you. You owe me $500." So I was like, "Okay, great, I'll take them." So
that's my biggest fear, is that the hobby shop's gonna call and I'm not gonna pick it up, and the wife and it's a pre-order I forgot.
Marty, did either one of the RS3s make it to the next paint scheme?
No, because they all went to the Canadian National in like 1956.
Oh, so they were off roster before that simplified scheme came out, right?
Yeah, and they actually had 2. They were renumbered, and don't ask me what the new numbers were. I think they were 3900 or 3959 and 3960 or something like that. Like 2 years later. So the 1859 and 1860 are only good for 2 years, 54 and 55. Oh, wow. Yeah, and it's not weathered, and I will say that it's not weathered because when I run it, I imagine that it's October of 1954, and these locomotives were delivered on October 4th, 1954.
They don't even have any oil leaks on them yet.
It's brand new. So.
That's soot from the exhaust from that Elko engine hasn't made it onto the roof yet.
Yeah, and I said on the Facebook page, it's the Bernie Kempinski added the smoke in Photoshop. He didn't actually. I didn't actually blow up my decoder or anything. So
there's quite a few people in the chat commenting about, and it smokes.
It smokes. As a smoke unit. No, it does not have a smoke unit. At least it doesn't have found it yet. All right, that's enough of this picture.
Move along.
Then we go through that. This is that big broad curve here, and this is my favorite railfan spot. The one ugly secret about this is you have to kind of watch the throttle going through here, because although I intended not to have any grades on the layout whatsoever, there is a slight uphill here. It's noticeable if you're running really slow when you come around the corner. The train will start to slow down. So that's why we christened this Unintentional Hill.
That's a good name.
So this is a shot kind of looking down at the curve here in the corner. And I guess I was just going to talk a little bit about how I do some of the scenery in this spot. You said you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The ground cover, I basically put down plywood, and then I might put a layer of Sculptamold around there. And in some places I'll build up some little hills with styrofoam, or I'll build up some hills with pieces of foam core that I'll use. Then I'll screed Sculptamold over it just to create slight undulations in the ground. And then my basic ground cover is this stuff. I like to use sanded tile grout for it. I use the tile grout for a couple of things, and this is one of them. And then I augment that with, I actually have to buy dirt in a tub. The soil around here, we don't have soil around here. We have basically bricks in the ground under the grass. And so, I mean, we have pure red clay. The color clay? That you see, this color you see on my land in the background there, that dark red color, reddish brown color, that is actually the color of our quote unquote soil in this area of Virginia. And so yeah.
Wow.
So it's just you're not going out in the backyard and getting a screen and sifting dirt and getting dirt for your land. It's not happening. So sometimes I buy it at the garden center. I'll buy some decomposed granite, but mostly what I do is just buy the Scenic Express stuff, and then I augment it with sanded tile grout. So I'm not spending $700 for a square foot of scenery.
Andy,
yep.
Real quick, I just had a great idea. Let's go down to Marty's place.
Yeah.
and let's bring them a 5-gallon bucket of Wisconsin dirt.
Good Wisconsin dirt.
We have
Good
clay
Wisconsin
here.
dirt. He knows what good Wisconsin dirt is all about.
I'm sitting on red clay where I'm at.
Oh, I'm not. I've got a sand base right here at my house. Yeah, I got all the dirt you can ask for.
Next on second section, dirt.
And then this is really important, Mike. Okay, I want you to write this down. I want you to get the percentages correct. Okay. Because then I take that stuff and I put it down there until it kind of looks good, and then I just blend it together with a foam brush. And if it looks too light, then I add more dark stuff. And if it looks too dark, I add more light stuff.
So it's that scientific. You got it nailed down to that precise of a formula.
I had a guy come by here one time, and he could not live with that. He just wanted the percentages. So I made up percentages, and he wrote them all down. Then on top of that, if it's going to be an area that's going to have a lot of trees and overbrush on it and stuff, I will use, for the sub base, I'll use that green florist foam, which is open cell foam, which you buy at a florist store or a Michael's or Hobby Lobby sell it. But no matter what I put down there, if it's going to have a lot of trees and stuff, then the next step is to paint on full strength white glue and sprinkle on ground up leaves. Now, I will say that I do grind up my own leaves. Except when I did this part of this project for this clinic, a couple of years ago, I did these photos. I needed it, and it was like the dead of winter, so I couldn't get any leaves. So I knuckled under and called Jim Elster at Scenic Express, and I paid him $9 for a little tub of leaves. Still can't believe I did that.
It probably pained you to do that.
No, I'm a real New England Yankee. It really bugged me to do that. The stuff I really love using, although you can go bankrupt using this on a large layout, so you do it sparingly, is these Martin Welberg products.
Yes.
And so I really like these ones that are shown here, these three things I have here. And you can see on the right-hand side there, I've kind of scattered them on the hillsides. And if you break them up and scatter them around and kind of combine them, they really go pretty far. I mean, they last quite a bit. You can cover quite a bit of ground with them. What I do with them, there's areas where I wanted to create this look where it was really massively overgrown between, say, a pasture or a field and the right of way, because I noticed that in a bunch of photos. And so I just tear or cut up the Welberg scenic mats in various shapes, and I just glue them with full strength Elmer's glue, not school glue but real glue, down to the sub base. And you can see on the right hand side there, it looks like essentially a bunch of non-square tiles all sitting down there.
Right.
To get them around the telegraph poles, I kind of cut a V-shaped slit in the things, and I slide them around the base of the poles. And the poles, by the way, the posts, the cross arms are Rick's cross arms that have just been painted, but the poles themselves are made from something called witch's broom. And that is something you find that people put on their front porch in like Halloween time and Thanksgiving time, like a straw broom.
Yeah, those
silly
brooms.
If you take that and cut it apart, and the things are really large diameter on the top, it's a whole bunch of sticks bundled together. It's large diameter on the top, and then as you get towards the base, it gets narrower and narrower. And I get to where it's about 1/8 of an inch or so in diameter, and I clip those off. And the smaller pieces go in the pile for the pulpwood stuff. The larger pieces I give to Bernie because he models an O-scale. And the telegraph poles you get from it look just kind of scraggly. They're not like perfect cylinders. They're a little scraggly. They have knots on them. They kind of have a little jinks and jerks to them, which is much more representative of what I see in telegraph poles.
Yeah, it's not the best wood that they used for the poles, right?
That's right.
It was what's left.
Yeah, and so here you see I've filled in the areas between the Martin Welberg stuff with static grass application, and just because it was easier to photograph it this way, I showed the rest of the static grass application here. But this is basically what I did, is I filled in all those gaps with full strength glue. And what I do is just dab the glue on in random patterns. I don't try to paint it on the surface unless I'm doing like the lawn or something. And then I take a bunch of these steel T-pins and I stick them in the glue all over the place. And each little glue spot gets a T-pin. And then that way, when I'm actually applying the grass, I can just move the alligator clip from T-pin to T-pin. And rather than I have not had much luck with like grounding rods and stuff like that. I find it's much better to get it grounded this way. And then I'll shake some static grass on there and move the alligator clip, shake some static grass on the next spot, and then work my way around. And then you end up with this massive pile of static grass, most of which isn't stuck in the ground and most of it's laying flat. And so what you do there is you let it set for about 10 minutes or so, and then you go over it with a vacuum cleaner. Now, I did this and I took this picture, and I really wish this is not really vacuuming. But what I should have done is shown it with the stocking, that nylon stocking I keep over the nozzle of the vacuum cleaner and collect the static grass, which is what I usually do. But this would just obviously suck up $50 worth of static grass. And so I use this, and what it does is it gets rid of the loose stuff and it pulls up. It has the effect of pulling up the stuff that's stuck to the glue. A few ways that I make the trees, and one way is to twist a whole bunch of wires. I know you guys know Boomer. He's a master at this. I don't claim to be a master at it at all. Essentially, it's a bunch of wires twisted together. I like using molding paste from Golden to sort of texture the trunks. I use it for something else too. We'll see in a minute, another type of tree. And then I super glue all kinds of little bits of all those super tree schnibbles that you don't know what else to do with. I super glue these to the tree frames and armatures. And then when you're done,
Schnibbles.
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 Okay.
Oh,
it's a Wisconsin term. I learned it in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Schnibbles.
Little schnibbles.
You can go to the restaurant and get a schnibble of strudel. And these are a bunch of bunch of twisted wire trees I built for Bernie Kempinski's O-scale layout. And some of these things are like 16 and 18 inches tall, and they're all wire, and they're essentially weapons. I mean, if you stick your hand in there, you're going to slice your arm open. But yeah, so that's one way to do it. This tree to the left here is another twisted wire tree. That's what they look like when they're finished and foliated. So that was that lead photo we looked at.
That looks really good.
Yeah.
And the other thing you want to make sure you do when you have trees, especially fall trees, you always want to put some leaves under the tree that have already fallen off. It's a nice little effect. It's pretty easy to do, but you don't want to have fall trees look like they haven't lost any leaves yet. The next, you can see the creamery back there. That's where we just were. And then we cross the St. Johnsbury in Lamoille County at grade. And then we come up here, and the two cars here are sitting on the St. J interchange track. The water tank there is a Campbell's water tank. I built that in high school, and I've had it on every layout I've had since.
I love that.
That's awesome.
I love that. I love that you're bringing a little nostalgia with you.
Yeah, it seemed to fit there, so I put it there. This is just a little aside. This is a Bowser 2-bay hopper, and we talked about Model Railroad Hobbyist. The very first issue of Model Railroad Hobbyist has the article on how I converted this Bowser car into a Central Vermont car. So the Bowser car is based on a Penzi prototype, a GLA hopper, and the CV's hoppers were a couple of years earlier than GLA's, and they're built by Press Steel Company. The one compromise I did make on this is I didn't change the end sills on this. The GLA's had really heavy duty end sills because they were in long heavy coal trains. The CV didn't have it had a similar end sill, but it was not as deep as that thing is. And I couldn't figure out how to change it. But other than that, I changed all the grab irons. And the Penzi cars had tapered side posts. And so the bottom of the side post tapers down. And if you looked in the MRH article, you'll see what I did. I essentially cut off the raised portion of the side posts on all of them, and then put a piece of styrene in there and blended it in to make it straight down to the side. Because that's the thing that nutty freight car modelers do. And the car on the left is one of my old Southern New England cars from my freelance railroad, and you can definitely see where the the style of lettering and stuff came. And the Southern New England mimics all the CV and Canadian National stuff.
Definitely some influence there.
Yeah, and what would be a New England town without another country store? I would think of country stores.
Gotta have them.
And here's the Missisquoi River Bridge.
Oh, wow.
And this is the scenic highlight of the Richmond Branch, and so I knew I wanted to include it. I tried as I may, I could not come up with a way to justify having 3 spans, even in the size layout I have, because the way the space worked, because of that stupid support post. So I ended up doing 2 spans and just kind of hiding the end of one in the trees and the brush and stuff. So I think you get the effect.
Ooh.
How about that? The model that?
The end of the Richmond Branch came on June 29th, 1984, when a Boston, it was not a CV train that derailed. It was a Boston and Maine train that was on a runaround to run around one of their other derailments. And so they ran a train across the Missisquoi River Bridge and derailed the last 4 cars in the train and wrecked one and really chewed up one of the spans. The span was actually taken out. They didn't even repair it. They just removed it. And then they just worked. This was, the paper mill's on the other side of the St. Albans side of the bridge in this case. And so they just ran to the paper mill in Sheldon Junction. They didn't go all the way to Richmond anymore after this. And so if you go there today, the entire Richmond Branch is a biking trail. And so the right-of-way has been converted by the state of Vermont into a bike trail. And all the way on the right, you can see the span that was wrecked and removed was replaced by the state of Vermont with that kind of a stylized truss bridge to connect the bridge to the other side of the river, so the poor bicyclists all didn't end up in the water. And this is my rendition of it. I will say the water here is not finished right in this particular picture. It needs another couple of coats of gloss, but essentially the bridge is. I use Central Valley bridge kits. That was a challenging experience. I'm glad I didn't do didn't do much of this. The one other thing I'll mention is the pier that you see in the middle there is actually a Walthers concrete pier that I surrounded with Chooch stone laminate stuff, that vinyl stuff that Chooch sells.
Yeah.
And I think it worked pretty good for the stone pier. I first started with one of the resin ones, and I tried to cut it to height, and that stuff's like cutting kryptonite. And so I had to come up with another approach, and that's what I ended up using.
That resin stuff is tough as hen's teeth. That is.
Oh yeah, I
unreal.
couldn't cut it, and you can't cut it straight and square either, and then you can't sand it straight. Sand it square,
right,
or flat on the bottom. This is the swing gate that lets you into the middle of the layout without having to get down on your hands and knees. And the way we built this was it's basically a plank of plywood with some bracing on the bottom. And then on the other side, one side is hinged. That's pretty straightforward. And then this other side, you see how it's arranged here. There's the framework of the layout, and then there's a gap. And that gap is the height of the MDF. And all the MDF has been sealed. You can kind of see it's sort of glossy there. And it's all been sealed. And then the bridge, the swing gate, basically fits in between that gap between the framework and the bottom of the plate. And you can see you can see the scratch marks from where it slides in there.
Oh, neat.
And it just slides in. And it just joins up like that. And the one thing we did do is use PC ties where the rails meet there, because it's and the other thing too is that rail, that's the top rail on the left-hand side, does not stand proud of the framework on the bottom, or people would be constantly like coming into the layout room and ending up with a scratch on their side of their arms. So that's how that works. I haven't added. I don't have an electrical interlock on it. I don't feel I need it because the way we run the layout is everybody comes into the fort. We close the gate, and then we don't open the gate again until we leave the fort. And the only problem I've ever had with it is at an open house, some guy decided to test the bridge right when the train was coming up the other way. So, and he didn't wait for the last two cars to get off the bridge. So he opened it without checking with me. As far as, so I model vintage railroads, right? So it's a little different than modeling today. Today you go out and look at it and see what you see. This is, so you have to do some research. This is the Ennisburg Falls Freight House. It's still there. It's actually the Ennisburg Falls Historical Society now. Oh. And there's a CV van parked next to it. But so there's a few buildings that are still there that look very much like they did during the era of the railroad. I took this probably, I don't know, when it's 1980 something. Some of the buildings are there and they don't really look like they did during the era of the railroad, although they're pretty close. So you see this building to the right here. So that path on the far right is actually the Richmond Branch. That's the right of way. And this is Main Street in Ennisburg Falls. And the brick building to the left with the pink flowers on it and stuff and that fancy Gothic trim is actually the old doctor's house from Ennisburg Falls from the 19th century. And so that's still there. Oh, cool. It's like a cafe now. I don't know what this thing on the right is, but it was, and I know what it was in 1941 because it was an ice cream shop.
Hey, there we go.
Cool. You gotta have an ice cream shop.
So that's the Ennisburg Dairy, and that's the Dairyman ice cream. And then you have a Shell station on the left-hand side there, which is not there anymore. There's a Shell station, but it's on the other side of where the tracks were. There's one of your coffin feed water heater equipped locomotives, Mike.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah. And
starting to really like those.
Homely looking.
I actually have 3 of them. And here's something that nobody ever includes on their layout. I've never seen anybody include a popcorn stand on their layout.
Huh.
So, and one thing I find is very interesting about this picture is this is Main Street in this town. This is one of the busiest grade crossings on the branch. And I don't see any indication of grade crossing flashers, crossbucks, nothing. I don't see anything.
It's not even a shack there.
Yeah, I don't see anything. I think everybody just knows the train's coming through town and get over it. And then there's the building on the right there is the Ennisburg Grain Company. And it's got a great Occident flower sign on it and a bunch of other signs. So that's definitely got to go on the layout just for the signs, if nothing else. Some buildings, like I said, look like they used to, and you can kind of study them and figure out this is pretty close to what it must have looked like. And you can sort of start with the prototype and backdate it to what it once looked like. And this is a picture of that same building from roughly late 1980s. And I apologize for the quality of this photo. I'm not much of a photographer, and I couldn't find the original print. So this is a copy of one that I published in the CV newsletter years ago. But you can see that the windows, there's those 2 garage doors on the left-hand side, and you can see here where those were, and then you can see the windows above them. Where the entry door was, and you can see sort of the faint outline of windows on that peaked roof section on the right. And so what I did is started with all that, and I built this building. And I have no idea what it was called in the 1950s, but I named it after my good friend Randy Laframboy.
That turned out great.
That looks really cool.
You nailed it.
Thanks. I find things in weird places. There was a videotape done years ago, and it was basically done from an 8mm movie camera recording of a trip up and back on the Richmond Branch. So this guy got to ride the train on the Richmond Branch, and a lot of it is bouncing around because he's riding in the caboose and the damn thing's bouncing all over the place. But I picked up a couple of snippets. One thing I found in this is the one picture I found in color of the plywood plant in Richmond. The other thing I noticed is this building on the left here that had this Worthmore speed sign stuck up on the roof, and I'm a sucker for signs. So I didn't really try to model I didn't have enough room to model the full building, but I ended up just taking a couple of, these are just Walther's plastic sheds stuck together with different doors on them. And then I just made up a worth more feed sign. I obviously couldn't grab it from the videotape clip you see in the upper right hand side. That's what an 8mm film converted to VHS, then remastered on DVD and played on a 92-inch television looks like. It's not great. And so I just used it as stylized and came up with a worth more feed sign I put there. And just a couple of weeks, I should mention this, a couple of weeks ago, I got some of the same MBR trees that Tom Johnson uses on his layout. And that's one of those to the left, and I love those trees. Those are so much easier than twisting your own wire trees. There was a whole row of sheds in Ennisburg Falls along the tracks, and they were basically supply sheds, like delivery sheds for lumber companies and coal companies and stuff. And the retail portions of those businesses were elsewhere, but they would just have their stuff delivered and picked up in down by the tracks. And so I really don't know what a lot of them look like. So I just kind of cobbled these together. The building on the left, I actually do know what that is, a prototype based on the prototype that's there, including, by the way, the gap in the foundation. So if you think that I shouldn't have a gap in my foundation, it actually was there on the real building.
I'm gonna say, someone probably would have said something like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
And then Mine Mount Models a couple of months ago or a few months ago did the McGurk coal company. So obviously I had to get one of those. And so the coal shed comes from there, and there was a coal shed there. And then the building on the right is another one of those Walthers super versatile shed kits. Yeah. And just visible to the left, you can see the bulk oil dealer, the Standard Oil dealer. Here's another shot of that building. You'll notice the road there is actually made using tile grout. And how I do that is I just start with the tile grout, and I started with this gray color, and I thought that's just way too light. So then I added a slightly darker gray, or a much darker gray, to create kind of a medium gray color. And then I just dump it on the road surface. And then I get out my favorite modeling tool, the foam brush, and these big clumps of tile grout I just kind of smush down and level it out. And what you end up with is kind of rough looking pavement, like asphalt pavement that's gone a little rough. And then you just spray it and treat it, and you're done with it. So most of the roads in Ennisburg Falls are made that way. And this is Depot Street.
They look pretty nice.
Yeah, and this is not anywhere near done yet, but I wanted to do a sort of the houses along the street with the trees before Dutch elm disease killed all the Dutch elm trees. And so I wanted to kind of have that look and create that look. And so that's what this is shaping up to be.
So Marty, there's a question from Ralph Renzetti. He says, Marty, do you prefer sanded over non-sanded grout?
I usually use the sanded stuff. Yeah, I find it's better for filling larger gaps in surfaces. So it tends to fill gaps a little better. Non-sanded tile grout is much, much finer. It's like powder.
Yeah.
Although I have used it, I just don't use it I'll occasionally use this for ballast too, by the way. I used it for ballast on some of the tracks. But in that case, I definitely recommend sanded grout, not unsanded grout, unless you're going to do like N scale or something.
There you go.
So the other trees, those trees that are on the street there, are made from crepe myrtles. And so these are, sorry, you guys bring me a box of dirt, I'll send you a bunch of crepe myrtle branches. I actually send these up to guys in Massachusetts all the time. They come down here and they request them. So crepe myrtle trees are very common in Virginia. They're common all along the East Coast and the West. They basically grow in really humid areas along the coast. And so when they're in bloom, that's what they look like on the left-hand side. And you can see that big flower, right? When it dies back in the fall, what you end up with is on the right. It just ends up with this branch structure with a bunch of seed pods on it. And you can trim off all those seed pods and some of the really goofy looking shaped branch, little twig branches. And what you end up with, it looks something like this. And then you can combine these together. This is how I do this. I just combine some of these together and glue them together with super glue to kind of create the branching structure, the main branching structure of the tree. And then I blend the base of it together to kind of take those 3 or 4 twigs and make one trunk out of it. I use that molding paste again. And if you notice on the right-hand side there, you can kind of draw the brush down on it a little bit, and you can sort of create the roots that are exposed above the ground to sort of blend it in. It just sort of does it naturally. This gives you a little better idea of it. And then I go on and hot glue all those super tree schnibbles, Mike's favorite word again. I glue all those little bits of super trees to it. And this makes you feel good about the fact that when you're using super trees, like you feel like you're throwing out half the box, right? So you keep all those and you keep all those and you just I hot glue them. I don't super glue these on. And I use what's called a glue pot, which is basically you put a stick of super glue in this bowl and it melts it. And then you just take a tweezers and dip it in the hot glue and stick it on the tree. I don't try to glue these on with like a hot glue gun. And so that's what you end up with there. And then when you add the flocking and stuff and paint the trunks and add some additional couple coats of texture to the trunks, that's what you end up with.
Those look awesome.
That looks great.
So I got to ask you a question. Your colors for your fall scene, how did you choose for the foliage? I mean, they're not your standard model railroad fall leaf kit, right? This is, I mean, where it's the bright yellows and the super oranges and the really gaudy stuff. Like these are really subdued. And what's the secret behind that? I mean, it looks fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Well, the first thing is I try to model like past peak fall. I don't model like the vivid fall colors. So I don't have a lot of yellow trees and I don't have a lot of bright, like flame orange trees. That tree I just showed you is probably one of the brightest ones I've done. The other thing I do too is I don't ever use one color of ground foam on any particular tree. Usually there's at least 2, if not 3. So I'll have like a darker color, and then I'll have a highlight color. And I'll try to keep them in the same family. So I might have a tan color and I'll add some highlights of yellow on there or orange on there. And then, et cetera. It's just like that. And it really just, if you look on my blog, I didn't put the slides in here because I didn't want to get too much into the trees, but down in the weeds. If you look on the blog, you'll find there's actually a couple of slides that are a formula that show how I blend the different colors to make something look like a sugar maple or make something look like an oak or make something look like an ash tree and just that's kind of a good starting point. And I specify what leaf material I use. I mostly use Scenic Express material. I use some knock and high key leaves. I use very, very little Woodland Scenics fall colors. In fact, I don't think I use any Woodland Scenics fall colors. I use Woodland Scenics other colors, but not fall colors.
So then Tim Moran's asking, do you treat your super tree material?
I usually treat it with matte medium, just diluted matte medium.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's really great.
That's a cool picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna pick on Athearn and pick apart all the the things that need to be fixed on this. But anyway, they know what they are. They've heard from us.
They've heard from us. That's okay. Yeah. They have a website that you can send your claim to. And
this is a wonderfully running engine, and for the most part, it's just fine. I mean, it has some detail issues and some paint detail issues, but it's overall it's okay. So I don't really have a big problem. It runs great and it sounds great. So
yeah, they're good runners, that's for sure.
Yeah, I must like them. I think I bought 4 of them. So, and I don't even model this error. I don't technically need them. So what I do is a long time ago, I committed to buy at least one of everything that anybody did Central Vermont. And for the longest time, I didn't have to buy anything. And then, now lately, several manufacturers have done CV stuff. So I buy them and put them in my display case. And my display case is getting full. So it's stop. So this is coming out of Edwardsburg Falls, going around the curve into Richford. Itself, Richford. This is the one picture I have of the plywood plant, Richford, and so you can see that on the right hand side there. And this would burn down a few months after this picture was taken.
Oh,
yeah. And then I should point out that people might be familiar with the Northeastern caboose or the USRA center cab caboose, which is a thing you see on the left there. Except the Central Vermonts and the Grand Trunks were USRA standard design cabooses that were built by ACF, but they were wood sheath. They were not steel.
Oh,
yeah, you can see.
Yeah, they were actually wood versions of the USRA caboose.
Wow.
This is the planned footprint for the paper, the plywood plant. I'm sorry, and you can tell by looking at, if you study the tracks carefully, and you'll see that it was the first iteration of this yard was how I thought it looked, and then I had to relay a bunch of the tracks when I found a better track map. This is how it looks today. So you can see where the cork road bed is, where it's been removed and moved around and changed. So this is I do have probably a better turntable for that spot, but I'm just using the Walters one because I had it left over and it was pretty straightforward to install. And in the background there, you can see the staging yard. So that's our tour of the Richmond Branch.
That was really
quite the tour.
That was quite the tour. So there's a handful of questions coming in. So Late Night Model Railroad asks, did that wood sheathing help somehow with heat during the winter? Was there a reason behind it that you know of?
Cheap.
Cheap.
I think Mike is right. Yeah,
there you go.
It was cheap.
Wood was a lot cheaper back then than steel, and so a lot of railroads, even in the Midwest, had Little Rock Island had a whole bunch of wood sheath cabooses and stuff like that. Illinois Central did too.
Well, now that you say that, Mike, so they had, I think there were 3 or 4 of those center cab ones. And then they had a whole bunch of end cupola, through what we call the 3-window vans. And I remember seeing those when I would go rail fanning in the 80s. They would still be running on the trains, on the locals anyway. Still same ones built in 1922 or whatever. Yeah, still with the pregnant tapeworms on them.
But, Would the Central Vermont maybe got those as a kit and built them themselves?
Oh, they built them themselves, but they built them on old boxcars.
Oh, there you go. Yep, that explains a lot.
The only ones that they had quite an elaborate car shop, actually. The only ones that they bought, the only cabooses they bought from a builder were the center cab. They bought those from ACF. And Grand Trunk had a couple of them. They ended up on the St. Johnsbury in Lamoille County. They were floating around a bunch of different places, but they didn't have a steel caboose until like the late 60s, early 70s. But they also didn't have a steel boxcar until like the 1963 or 64. They got their first steel boxcars.
Really? That's kind of late to the game, isn't it?
Yeah, all their cars were. They had several classes of single sheath boxcars, but those were they were all delivered in the 20s and they ran all the way through the 60s, some into the 70s.
So Marty, there were a bunch of questions that I wrote down while we were out. First and foremost, David Winther asks, do you laser cut your own buildings?
I draw them, and I know a guy.
And you know a guy.
And I know a guy. Although I do have sitting out in the garage right now, I have a laser cutter. I just haven't used it yet. I'm trying to read through the instruction book and figure out how to set it up and use it. But yeah, I typically have drawn my own stuff, and then Bernie Kempinski has a laser cutter,
Okay.
and so he's kind enough to laser cut them for me. But he insists that I do my own drawing because we get into arguments when I draw something and then he doesn't cut it right. So.
Tom Holly had a question about your paper mill, and that was such a cool picture with the elevator shaft for the pulpwood. But he asked, did you have a dedicated switcher for the paper mill, or does the local switch out that job?
The paper mill actually had its own switcher. It had an old, it looks basically like a box on rails from the 1920s on to the 60s or so, and then they got a trackmobile.
Oh, like an old box cab type of thing?
Yeah, it was really crazy. And so
was it kind of like that old little box cab thing that Model Die Castings used to sell? Like that real tiny? Or MDC?
Not even that big.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was.
That's
really
just showing that just shows my age that I can throw that out of my memory bank. Holy cow.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, it was really kind of crazy. I'm trying to see, can I find it here? I have too many pictures in this thing. Anyway, yeah. So go ahead. I'll come back to that in a minute.
Sure. Late Night Model Railroad has a question on the layout planning. He says, how long did it take you and Lance to go from initial concept to the quote unquote final track plan?
Oh gosh. It wasn't more than a month or two.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty fast. And so how the process worked is Lance originally designed based on my input originally. I said, well, let's look at doing an island layout because I didn't want to duck under and I wanted continuous run, and the shape of the room required like an island design, and so he tolerated me and he designed it, basically did a footprint of an island layout, an island shaped layout. And we both agreed that didn't work because anytime you do an island layout, you don't get as much, you're not getting as much as you would with
like a perimeter type,
right? And
like going around the wall and stuff. Yeah.
And so it's so we got rid of that idea, and then he came up with the initial sketch of this one, and that was after a few weeks. And I scribbled all kinds of comments and thoughts and notes on them, and he called me back and he said, here, I see you have 20 comments. Here's 20 answers why you shouldn't do any of those. So,
wait, does that sound
interesting? Friends, Marty.
Yeah,
Andy, does that sound familiar? Andy will ask me a question, and I'll say, "Well, here's 5 reasons why you shouldn't do that."
It just was, it was like, okay, I got nothing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Andy, while we're still digging up that picture, Andy Crawford was asking what kind of laser that do you have? Because he's all about one. He just hasn't decided which one yet.
After talking to several of my friends that have lasers that don't, one thing, Bernie actually has like a laser cutting business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little different for him. He has a very elaborate epilogue laser. It's very big.
Mm-hmm.
I got one of the Omtech ones with I think it's a 10 by 12 or a 10 by 14 bed. And it's like it's one of these Chinese made things, water cooled ones. It's a CO2 water cooled laser. That's what it amounts to. And I know Bill Schneider uses it for buildings on his layout. My friend Ted Collada bought one based on Bill's recommendation, so I bought one based on Ted's recommendation. So, and it's a few $100s. It was I think it was all in like $500.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
That's not horrible.
That's a couple of engines or 5 or 6 cans of ground up leaves from Scenic Express.
That's right.
That's
This
not
is
bad at all.
can you see this?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so the cool paper mill building,
Yeah.
you see it on the far left side there. You can it's kind of buried in the trees because it's painted dark red. You can see the original building, and this is what the paper and that ramp, that walkway that goes across, or that conveyor that goes across,
Yeah.
right behind the first smokestack on the left. So that's what the mill looks like now. It's just got all this other stuff along the river that was added over the years. And I don't have to model any of that, even though I'm supposing it's there because it's all off the end of my fascia.
That's such a cool scene, though. I mean, with the river right in front like that, that is.
How do you not want to model that, though?
Yeah.
I mean that's just kind
That's
of
a
like.
Oh, I might
signature
want to
scene.
model it. I just never get it done. And here's the switcher, the paper
There you
mill
go.
switcher.
Was that the Trackmobile?
That's the Trackmobile. That's
have-
Mississaquoia Pulp and Paper number 4. That's the modern big one. And then
Wow.
somewhere in here, I have I know I have a picture of the original. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. I have a picture of the original.
It's just funny to see that. It's basically like a lawn tractor on rails.
I was gonna say it's an R4. It's an R4T4 is what it is.
Yeah. It's. Oh man, that's good. That's good. So, any other questions for Marty? Make sure that you're getting them into the chat, so we can. I don't know what's going on here with the screen.
I don't either.
We're having a good time, that's for sure.
Oh no! Can you see this picture?
It's still.
No, let me
yeah, oh,
let me remove it and then you can bring it back on.
Okay.
But yeah, late night model railroad. Yeah, it gives you an idea to mount a coupler to an old pickup truck. That's pretty much it. So yeah, we're back. I think we're stuck on the old Trackmobile here, Marty.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah.
We can't see this one. Maybe if I do
Oh.
this. I'm determined to impress Mike because I actually have this damn picture.
oh boy.
So meanwhile, I'll do a little song and dance while we fill some time here. So tonight, after the presentation, it looks like Marty's got something up here now.
So there's the original switcher there, Mike.
On the right-hand
See it
side.
on the right-hand side?
It looks like.
Oh, it looks like what's his name from Thomas the Tank?
Toby.
Toby
It looks
from
like
Thomas
Toby
the
from
Tank.
Thomas the Tank.
Yes,
Yeah,
it looks like just like that.
It's a Whitcomb. Yeah, it's a Whitcomb switcher. So that's what they used for many years. So this picture dates to sometime in the 1920s, I think. So
What is it? Is that the pulpwood pile in the background there?
Yeah, that's one of the pulpwood piles. Yeah, there's a couple.
Holy
one of them.
Nikes!
Holy schnibbles! That's a lot of pulpwood.
Yeah, if you look
Wow.
in a issue of MRH from a few months ago, I actually did a whole article on the paper mill. It's in there.
Wow.
It's got pictures of it's got a couple of pictures of guys standing on top of the pulpwood pile, which I can't imagine they could do that now, but that's what they did back then.
Oh, that's fantastic.
All right. Am I not sharing anymore? I'm not trying to.
No, you're good. You've cleared the airwaves here. No, and so now there's a new drinking game that's come out because of the word schnibble. Every time we say it, Otter Creek and Rio Grande says drink. So this is the type of high quality, highbrow entertainment that you guys and gals have signed up for this evening. So we are gonna do a little segue here. So Mike does have a bit of content prepared for us as well. We are going to do short line of the show this evening. And Marty, feel free to stick around for that if you'd like. Where are we tonight?
We're in Mississippi.
We're in the great state of Mississippi, and Mike's going to be sharing some of the research that he's put together this week. I know we were going to do it last show, but we never did. So, in the meanwhile, though, to the section crew, we still have about 85 people out in the chat. If you have questions for Marty or any of the material that he's covered, let us know. Throw that in the chat. I did throw Marty's blog and YouTube channel. They're in the chat this evening. They're also in the show notes. So check the description. All of Marty's places on social are out there. And then, of course, go to MRH and follow him on the Getting Real column. You won't regret it. That's for sure. Some great tips in there. So we're going to do our quote unquote commercial break here, kick it over to the Greasy Meat Hands band, and they'll introduce the next segment here for short line of the show. Unless, Mike, you have any objections?
No, I was just kind of wondering what that pause is all about. Like, did you forget what it was called?
Yeah, I did. I just blacked out. It's live TV.
It's live.
All right, short line of the showtime, Mike. We're in Mississippi. Lay it on us.
Yep, Mississippi. They got railroads. Go check them out. No. All right. The more research I'm doing on these short lines, the more I'm finding is that there's a lot of really, really interesting little railroads that got gobbled up by these big, conglomerates. The Orange Borg has got a whole bunch.
Genesee and Wyoming.
Genesee and Wyoming. Yeah. Genesee and Wyoming. Orange Borg. That's a Star Trek reference for those that don't know what a Borg is. But it's, so I found one that actually is related to one we've done before. Matter of fact, it's related to the very first one we did. Yes.
30 some odd shows ago.
30, yeah. So, okay, let's see how I can do this. I'm going to do this and then this. This is our high quality production, Marty.
Yep. It's like SpongeBob blowing a bubble.
Yeah.
You do this, and you do this, and you do this.
Go here and click that and go ding. And there we go. We're going to go to Mississippi Export Railroad. They are the sister railroad to the Alabama Export Railroad that we did in the very first short line of the show.
Hey.
Yeah. Pretty neat, eh?
Tying it all together, Mike. That's clever.
Trying to. That's, I got a couple of tricks up my sleeve. Let's see if I can do this without screwing it up here. All right. So the logo in the middle is their logo that they had in their 1970s-ish era, like the per diem boxcar era. That was the logo that they had. I couldn't find a good quality logo of it, so I just kind of blew up a boxcar logo, and that's it. Their main logo is like the one on the right. But if you notice, they have on the left, that's a 100-year celebration logo that they had. So railroad's been around since 1922. And as a matter of fact, you're going to see at the beginning of this whole thing, they were actually started well before that. They just weren't called the Mississippi Export Railroad. So they go and they are in the state of Mississippi, obviously. They are between Pascagoula, Mississippi, and Evanston, Mississippi. They started as the Moss Point and Pascagoula Railroad in 1894 as a 4-mile-long logging railroad. So what's really interesting, and I have some pictures about that, is that railroad kind of took a little bit of a transformation over time, and it grew. into basically what we have here over, well, you'll see. It was renamed. What was it renamed? I want to say it was the Alabama and Mississippi. I can't remember. But in 1922, the Luce family purchased the railroad, and they still own the railroad to this day. They have 42 miles of tracks. They connect with 7 different railroads: Canadian National, CSX, now CPKC, Norfolk Southern, and then the 3 short lines that you see there, which if I blow up the map, which I'm going to zoom in on this map is crazy cool. It actually shows, this is right off of Mississippi Export's website. It actually shows where things connect and what is there. So you have Big Points Yard, what does it say? Carter Road Yard. You have the interchange up at Evanston with with several of these railroads. Alabama and Gulfport, I believe, is this one. Port of Mobile is another one. Oh, the CGR Railroad. That's the one that has the ferry that goes to Mexico. So this map is really, really kind of neat. It's not real overly detailed, but it does highlight and pinpoint exactly like what is where. Basically, kind of your typical little short line railroad hauls LPG gas, lumber, building materials, pelletized goods, wood and plastic, things like that. And they did just celebrate in 2022 their 100th anniversary. I didn't mention the coal, though, because the coal trains are really kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to try to get to that here in a little bit. So here's the Moss Point and Pascagoula Railroad. This is the oldest known photo of the beginnings of that railroad from 1895. That was a 240. Look at how stubby that thing is. Wow. And this was one of the engines that they had while they were running a 4-mile long railroad. Look at a guy isn't that something? It's incredible. And then they purchased some of these 262s. This photo comes from 1902. The Alabama and Mississippi, the railroad was the name was changed from the Moss Point and Pascagoula to the Alabama and Mississippi Railroad in 1915. That's one of the A&M engines right there. Okay, so like I said before, the Luce family, specifically Gregory M. Luce, he purchased the A&M in 1922 and changed the name to the Mississippi Export Railroad. So it has not had a name change since 1922. And like I said earlier, the Luce family owns the MSE to this day. I kind of thought that was cool. They had an actual portrait of the guy.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I was having a real hard time trying to find operating information on this railroad for today. But what I understand is they run 2 or 3 trains a day. One is typically a unit tank train with LPG and things like that on it. And the coal trains use BNSF power and are about 135 cars long, and they go down to a power plant. Yeah. So you can run this. Here's a short line where you can run big BNSF power on it and unit coal trains, as well as mixed manifest trains, and it'll be perfectly fine. You're looking, not too many short lines of this size run big unit coal trains like that. Now, I'm going to blow this up again. Here's their motive power. And this is their steam engines are up on the top. And then this is their all-time roster. And this came from the dieselshop.com. So
it's a good resource.
It is a really, really good resource. Now, do you see something that kind of looks a little familiar here?
Well, I do. There's one that jumps right out of the screen. It's that XC&W GP50.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the NW2 that was sold to the Manitowoc Tomahawk or Marinette Tomahawk and Western number 62, and then became Nicolay Badger Northern 62, and was originally a DT&I unit. This is the engine that is sitting in the middle of the woods up in Goodman, Wisconsin.
That's the one that is on our short line of the show?
That is the one that is our short line of the show segment engine.
Oh man, I connect the dots.
There you have it. See? Yeah, see?
All right.
Yeah, see, I kind of wanted to see if you could pick up on that little Easter egg there. That's it. That's all there is to
one.
it. But yeah,
that one right there. That one right there.
Yeah, that one.
Ha! Hot snot.
However, you are right. The old C&W, we're going to get a pic. I have a picture of this one. The old C&W GP50, they call her Big Daddy.
Yeah, Tom Holly was saying that. Yeah, the MSC GP50 is named Big Daddy.
Yeah, Big Daddy, which is kind of fun. Now, here's some photos. For a short line railroad of this size, typically what you would find is a lot of, let's say more frugal by nature accessories to their locomotives. Not these guys. These guys went full out. I mean, they've got lighting packages that almost rival the Southern Pacific on them.
Yeah, right.
They regular standard headlights, but then they have the oscillating light right here.
Yeah.
Strobe. Paint scheme is really simple though. Just plain black and yellow. And this is the older scheme, obviously. And in the background here, you can see, now this is a I have a picture of this one, but this is a C420 back here. And look at that headlight package they had on the rear of that unit.
Yeah. Wow.
How cool is that? I mean, and this is just a little 42-mile line. Oh, there's the front.
Oh, there you go.
There's the front.
Look at the class lights over the number boards.
Yup. Typical Elko class lights. Yup. The C420. This was, there was a story behind this, and now I lost the story. I can't remember what. There was a reason why they got to C420 and not another EMD, and I for the life of me, I can't remember what that is. But it's still really neat looking engine. SW1500, number 64. Again, look at the funky headlight cluster that they had on these. And it was on the front and the back of the cab as well. I mean, it's just really kind of neat. It's something that's a little out of the ordinary when it comes to like short lines to have these really big lighting clusters like this. You just don't see it very often. No. You know, because they typically wanted to keep things as frugal as they could.
Yeah, cost effective, right? That's the polite way to put it.
Right. Yep. Another thing is too, in a lot of SW1500s did have this that like for myself, I'm not used to seeing them like this because when I operated the SW1500s, when we still had them on the Wisconsin Central and before the CN sold them all off, is the handrails were full length along along the engine. Here, it's just like the old SWs where they're just stubby right by where you get on, and then you have this grab iron thing that you hold on to on the top, and nothing else
protecting you from falling off the side of the loco.
Right, which I would probably do. I would.
Look at that scene though. Look at all the litter and rubble and that old barrel. That's a really, like, if you're trying to figure out a little yard scene or some industrial scene, that picture right there's got tons of detail.
Crates full of Lord only knows what.
Yep, coffin crates and
old brick foundation of some sort for something. The old speed swing in the back here, or a tractor in the back.
Yep.
I mean,
and that barrel probably has taco sauce in it. So I mean,
it has to. I mean,
yeah, you'd think so.
They also have right now their main power are GP38-2s.
Like everyone else,
just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But here they went with red lettering and actually have the name of the railroad on the side of the long hood. They're still kind of frugal with their details, but they still have the gyrolite, I think it was called, and in the nose, and then they have a strobe flasher on the top. And then if you look at the back of the 65, which is there's still another headlight cluster here in the back. So they really did, I
wonder why that is.
It's probably like some safety thing that they wanted to do for like grade crossings, I would imagine. I mean, but what stands out to me here is the fact that these have the old Bloomberg B trucks on them. Yeah, which a lot of them have, depending on what railroad you had. But again, still simple paint scheme, really easy to paint. Here's Big Daddy.
There's Big Daddy,
complete with the gong nose bell.
Yep.
Which survives. Look at the size of that air conditioner.
Well, it's Big Daddy.
It's Big Daddy. Yeah.
It runs hot. You got to have a big air conditioner to keep Big Daddy cool.
You betcha. But see here again, if you compare this lettering here with this lettering, they've gone with a more, I don't want to call it Union Pacific, but it's more that style-ish. But it's a very UP-ish looking style of lettering.
So this is interesting. Tom Holly says Mississippi has a large number of highway/rail accidents. So maybe that's they would paint engines to make them stand out, right?
Yep.
I think I learned that on the Around the Layout podcast with Ray Arnott, and he had I forget the guest on that. The Chinook lines. Where they painted the noses to make them stand out at crossings.
Well, and they still do that, They to this day they do that even,
Yeah, Joe Bohannon.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. But that Big Daddy doesn't have it.
No,
he's got the bell. He's got the bell. So, and one thing that I find really interesting is the fact that they didn't bother. Now, okay, here's a good lesson for everybody who wants to paint a locomotive. Don't worry about masking through the grills, because obviously
you don't need to.
You don't need to. Masking around the grills is not necessarily an absolute must. I saw this and I thought, boy, that's just funny. I mean, a lot of railroads probably did this, but it's really, and in modeling, that can be kind of tough to do, but
So Thomas Chris makes a good point. Big Daddy's got ditch lights. The other ones don't.
Well,
Yeah.
this photo here was from 2016, and this photo is, I don't know if I have a date on this photo. Do not have a date on this photo. But I would imagine this is probably from the early 90s ish, if I had to guess. What did I do here? Oh, there we go.
No. There you go.
Now, freight cars, they got boxcars. And these are just some examples of them. They did dive into the per diem era, and that's what their per diem era boxcars looked like. If you notice, some have the white lettering and white cushion service to them. Some have black. And then they have a whole bunch of cars that they got secondhand. And as a matter of fact, I've actually had a handful of MSE boxcars make it to Manitowoc. So over the course of the last several years.
The fancy ones are just the
re-stencils. It's the re-stencil ones, nothing super fancy. But that's basically their freight car fleet. They didn't really have a whole lot of anything else. And this is kind of where their bread and butter is. They did have a couple of cabooses.
There you go.
There's a wood caboose for you there, Marty, on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
That one's that's kind of a fancy painted one. And then they have the steel caboose over here on the right-hand side.
A little longer than the CV USRA one.
Little bit, right?
A little bit. Yeah.
Just a hair.
Also looks like it might be. Is it plywood sheath or is it? No, it looks like it's got regular sheathing on it.
I think it almost looks like sheathing boards on the ends, but it looks like the sides are plywood.
Yeah,
that would be
unusual. Yeah,
because if you look, you can see the slat lines on the end, but I'll zoom in, see if there's no slat lines on the side. So either it's a wood end with a steel side, or it's a plywood side.
It might be a reused caboose from a used caboose from something like the ACL. I don't know.
I don't know.
Had a lot of those center cupola cars. They had longer center cupola cars that were kind of a standard thing.
And it's got a wooden cupola to it. So I mean, it's I thought that was cool. Kind of neat. That's kind of a neat caboose.
An interesting caboose.
Yeah.
Everybody thought I was asleep, but I'm not asleep.
Not yet.
The camera for a minute because I had to run and get something. But
well, this was 1962 also, so that's kind of starting to get into the steel caboose era, right? Or is that still a little bit of ways away yet?
Oh no, that's definitely in the steel caboose era. I mean, some roads had steel cabooses back in the 20s and 30s. 1920s and 30s. So it's been, we're well past that here. But I'm just trying to figure out if it's a home built thing or is it something they got used from somebody else. It doesn't look like it was built new by a car builder like this. It looks like some modifications have been done.
Right, 4 windows on the side. That just seems an odd.
And they also seem like they're a weird height.
Yeah.
They look like they're a little low.
Short, right?
What else is really weird is look at the side of the helical or the elliptical springs on the trucks. Look at how far they stick out.
Those are real big leaf spring trucks.
Those are real huge big leaf springs on them. I mean, typically caboose trucks, they aren't that big. I mean, this.
Kenneth Oriole is asking, is that a screen door on the back?
I think it is. Yeah, sure. It probably is. And it probably has an internal door to it also. So that they could probably, have the inside door open and
looks have like a custom jobby to me.
Keep the bugs out. Yeah. So okay. There we go. Now you can buy models for this railroad.
Really?
Yeah, this is it. You're looking at them. But you can find Athearn made the FMC boxcar with the white lettering, this is a model die casting, an MDC kit, and I want to say this is an Atlas boxcar, the one with the black lettering, the 889. I want to say that one's from Atlas. So I mean, and then this other one I believe is from Athearn also. So there are some examples of things out there to help model this railroad. That's about it.
They're sharp looking though.
They are cool looking.
I think the one on the bottom is an old roundhouse car.
Yeah, the old model die casting
roundhouse.
Yeah, and even that one looks pretty slick. You know, I mean, it's just I like the logo. If you notice, this logo is way smaller than this one. Doesn't have the black outline, and I mean, we can go on and nitpick the models, but these are old. Looking at eBay is where I found these photos. So they're out there. I tried looking back at Athearn's releases, and I couldn't pinpoint when these were actually offered, but they were offered a while ago. Yeah. A while ago.
This is not your entire Mississippi export boxcar collection, Mike?
No, not at all. No, I have zero. That's one thing I also wanted to bring up. I have not found any decals for this.
Really, Harold King didn't even do decals for this years ago?
I couldn't find any in the Harold King catalog that I had. And I may have glossed right over it. Microscale has not made it that I could find, unless it was part of one of those, you know how Microscale would throw like 3 railroads in a boxcar set
on a sheet. Yeah.
On a sheet. Yeah. So it might be in one of those kind of sets, but it would not be a difficult railroad to get decals made for, I don't think, with the exception of finding a quality of logo. But for the most part, you know, if you're modeling it more modern day, you just need a bunch of stuff that you can patch out and re-stencil, and off to the races you go. They have a YouTube presence, and it is actually pretty substantial. This is actually a really interesting little one. This Kate Luce, she's the president and CEO of the Mississippi Export Railroad, and it's just a little bit of a who we are and what we do and why we do things, kind of a, you know, like a promotional video, but it's actually interesting. It's an interesting little video. But there are several different videos on here. And one of the cool things is the fact that while researching the Mississippi Export Railroad, you see how this Vicksburg section crew video is here? Mm-hmm. Vicksburg, Mississippi, this is one of the last areas in the United States where they were actually using fully manned manual track lining section crews, where these guys the video is incredible to watch. I mean, they have a caller, or like a boss or a caller, and he's out there giving the cadence, and at certain points they all, you know, just all in, it's like a dance. They just go and they do everything, and the track and the ties and everything moves over a half an inch. Then they go and set themselves again, and boom, off they do it again. Such a cool video to watch, and it just gives a really good. That was 1978, as the video says, but that just goes to show how far we've come from doing that with the technology that we have in the track equipment that they use today to the way they used to do things. And that's a really neat video. I would really suggest you go and take a look at that. It's just part of American railroad history that's kind of gone. Like you won't ever see that ever again.
Yeah.
So Flickr, obviously, as you can see, enormous presence on Flickr.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many pictures on this railroad to really go through. It's really well documented, and it really has kind of a big following. So check that out. Obviously, like I said, YouTube, there are Facebook groups for it. Search for Mississippi Export Railroad. The reporting marks are MSE. Local photos is a really good one. Pinterest, there's some stuff on Pinterest. Railroad Picture Archives, obviously. I mean, they're kind of everybody's go-to when they need something. And then Flickr. So that's the Mississippi Export Railroad. And the next time we meet,
the next short line
of the show, this is going to be a little teaser for you, okay? We're going to Missouri. The colors give it away. The color of the background gives away the railroad. So see if you guys can figure out what railroad we're going to be doing in the next one in Missouri.
There you go.
So, and that is the short line of the show.
Well done, Mike. That was really, really, that was well done. A lot of information. I love the history behind it. It was neat to see how it transformed from a 4-mile logging railroad to, Big Daddy today.
To Big Daddy. Yeah, that and that's one of the things that when we're doing these short lines, it's one of the things that I when I stumbled across all that history stuff while looking at their 100th anniversary thing, and I was just like, this is absolutely incredible. This should be a part of this. Because and I'm going to try to incorporate a little bit more history into how these railroads became what they were. But I for those of you that want to see one of these engines, it is the Nicolay Badger Northern, or the former Nicolay Badger Northern, is sitting in the middle. It's near a dirt road. And it's near a dirt road on a abandoned piece of disconnected trackage
logging
in Goodman, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Or near Goodman, Wisconsin. That's thank you, Tom. If you ever get up in the north woods of Wisconsin and you happen to think of it, that's go check it out while it's still there, because there's been rumors that it may get moved.
Be on the move.
Or and it may be getting moved from in the middle of a truck or several trucks.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate reality of today's society, is things don't stick around. They get made into razor blades.
You chop them up.
Yep.
They chop them up.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic, Mike, and thank you for sharing that with us. We're getting close to the end of the show here, so I do want to give the folks out in the section crew, we got about 70 people still in the chat here as we're at almost the 2.5-hour mark. Get your questions into Marty here before he takes off for the evening, and takes and any questions about the MSE, get those in there for Mike, because that was a really good presentation. So
I have a question for Marty. I have a question for Marty. Marty, are you still there?
He's around.
He is.
Yeah.
I want to know what's next. I want to know what's next for his layout. Is there anything big on the horizon that he may be thinking about possibly doing? Is there maybe some type of an expansion that might happen? Is there something beyond what we saw that he might be thinking about doing? Because it kind of looked like he had a little bit of room in that room yet.
I don't know, but
maybe going back to S scale, doing the whole thing all over in S.
Could be. So fun. I think he had mentioned early on in the show that he was going to stick to something that was achievable, right?
Yes.
So if things are going to be achievable, I'm assuming that he'll press on with some of that extra space. So I think Marty's back now.
Marty, hey Marty. Oh, where'd he go?
As far as Ralph Renzetti's question, no workbench section tonight, Andy. Not tonight. So we're gonna, just to give the section crew an idea of what's going on with our show format. We're gonna switch off every other show between short line of the show and what's on your workbench. So next time we'll have special guest referee Mike Rose with us on the what's on your workbench. So that's going to be next week. So we are going to have a show on the 20th, 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And then after the 27th, we're going to have a show as well where we'll have Lance Minheim on the show. And then after that, in July, we'll take a little break for July 4th holiday here in the United States. And then we'll have Jimmy from the DIY and Digital and his YouTube channel on the show as well. So we have a pretty solid lineup here in June. Marty's kicking it off for us and knocking it out of the park with his presentation this evening. So we'll alternate what's on your workbench for those who want to participate in that. And if you want to get in on the game for what's on your workbench and try and get the dubious honor of being on the winners sheet at the beginning of the show, make sure you join our Facebook group at the Second Section Podcast out on Facebook. Make sure you answer the questions. If you don't answer the questions, I'm not going to let you in. So Facebook. Make sure you answer the questions. If you don't answer the questions, I'm not going to let you in. So Facebook, make sure you answer. So Marty's got double. I'm not going to let you in. So Facebook, double secret mute there from Marty. That's good stuff. I just muted his mic there, so maybe he'll come back. Marty, you still there? I hear some clicking, but I don't hear anything else from Marty. So that's okay.
Maybe now his video went bad.
Can't know. It's a interesting dilemma, this live stream. So anyways, any other comments, questions tonight? Get him in there. We'll see if we can't get Marty back. If not, maybe he had a power outage or something like that too, like we had on.
Just put your elbow on your truck.
Huh?
You just put your elbow on the truck.
No, I have a spot here where I put my elbow, and then I just put it in front of it. It's an illusion. But anyhow. So anyways, Mike, just want to recap tonight's episode. What'd you think? I thought it was fantastic. Marty's layout
that's really cool. I want to get down there and see it in person, because I tell you what, that thing is really, I'm not a steam guy at all, but that's kind of makes you want to go and do something like that. It's really, really kind of neat. I do like the fact that he mentioned that it's a layout built for one. I thought that was actually kind of neat. Oh boy, I heard a sigh.
Yeah. Marty is still with us. Maybe not.
Marty?
That's
Marty?
okay. So what we'll do for this evening is we'll close up shop here. I think it was excellent. I loved how Marty had things stitched, like he said, a series of shelf layouts stitched together into one big layout.
That's a cool concept,
That's kind of the theme I'm stealing myself. So it's something to behold. So let's see here. Other administrative stuff, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to support the show,
Hey!
There's Marty. He's back.
My earbuds ran out of juice, so I had to recharge them real fast. Actually, I grabbed my wife's. So
there you go.
Just don't tell her. She has dead ones in her machine now.
Hey, I know you wanted to do something achievable. My question I was going to ask you quick is do you have any big plans for any kind of new stuff coming up, or are you just going to stick with what you got, or any expansion ideas, or?
There's a potential to go into. There's a behind where the staging yard is now. There's actually a bathroom, but behind that bathroom, there's about a 5-foot area in a storage room that leads into about a 15 by 20 foot storage room. And I might someday, the deal is if I finish this layout as it is now, I can plan to go back in there. I'm going to finish that room, and I would probably add a couple more staging tracks to it, and maybe start running like through trains and do a little bit more elaborate of an operating session. And what I would probably do back in there is something completely different than the Richmond Branch as far as the CV goes. I'd probably do like New London or Willimantic or Palmer or something like that. Just another part of the railroad. Because it would be physically separated from the rest of the railroad, it wouldn't be too obtrusive.
Could you do something like where the CV and the Rutland get together back in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, I could do Burlington, which is where they really interchange.
Yeah, that'd be kind of sweet.
So that dovetails nicely into a question we did get from someone in the audience saying, do you know of any resources for the Palmer sub or the Willimantic that I model?
Yes.
Good answer.
All right, good answer.
Asked and answered.
Yeah, that's a second
section. This will lead me to another plug. When I talked to Ray a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that I was one of the founders of the CV Historical Society.
That's
and
right.
Oh, yes, you are.
We've done several issues of the Ambassador over the years between on Willimantic. There were several issues done there. We've had a couple of conventions there. The other thing you could do as a resource is there's actually a really good railroad museum in Willimantic, and they've restored the turntable that was in Willimantic, and they've restored the little engine house that the New Haven had there. Willimantic was a really cool place. Lots of big stone and brick mills overhanging the river, and essentially the New Haven was two lines of the New Haven crossed, and the CV crossed two legs of the New Haven line. And that junction was controlled with a wooden, basically a paddle board that controlled the junction itself. So that was the interlocking, and we're talking 1960 through the 1960s here. If you look on it, there's a fella out in California actually who's building a model of essentially the New London and Palmer subs. And he's got Willimantic on his layout. Jim Providenza did an article in RMC a few months ago on building that Willimantic signal. The original article on that actually has some information on how it operated appeared in an issue of MR back in the 50s or 60s, but you can get it from Kalmbach or the NMRA library, and that'll give you a good setting for Willimantic as far as what was going on. And
go.
the title of
there
the
you go.
article, and I've got to share this because it's the best title of an article ever in MR. It was called "A Dilly of a Signal" is the name of the article.
That's pretty cool.
Like a dilly bar from Dairy Queen.
Yeah, a dilly of a signal. The other place you can try, if you want more historical information, is the University of Connecticut Library has thousands
Oh.
of Central Vermont pictures from the CV on the southern end. If you go to the University of Vermont Library, they have a bunch of photos from the northern end of the railroad, but the southern
Very
end is all
cool.
down at Yukon and Stewart's Library, and the research assistants there are wonderful people to deal with.
Never
There
thought
you
of
go.
going to college libraries to get something
Yeah,
like that.
a lot of them have information on local. It tends to be local things. I mean, local railroads, local shipping companies, and things like that. You can, of course, you can go out to Chicago to the Pullman Library for rolling stock information, and then the obviously the California State Railroad Museum has a huge collection of stuff.
Yeah.
Late night model railroad. One last question here says, how far out is your achieved status for your railroad?
The plan I came up with Lance was when we talked about it was this 3, 3, and 3 plan. 3 years to get the basic infrastructure done, 3 years to get the fine modeling done, the structures and the scenery, etc., and 3 years to just do whatever I want with it. And then at that point, I'll make a decision on what to do with the railroad. So right now we're sitting at just about 4.5 years, and I'm about 30% done. I'd call the layout 30 to 35% done. So I probably got like 2 or 3 more years.
Wow.
Oh wow, that's a good way of looking at it. Though.
Good way to look at it.
Yeah, breaking things down so that way you're not, leapfrogging all over the place.
The idea behind that, and Lance will talk to you about this more if you press him. The idea behind that is you don't want to embark on a project that's going to take you 15 years to build if you're only going to be in the house for 6 years.
Right.
Because you'll constantly be chasing your tail. The other key part of this, and I've not been great on this. The last layout I did numerous rearrangements and redesign, and there's an embarrassing amount of detail on that on the blog. If you go back on the blog, the blog is like 14 years old, so it's got a real complete history of what I've done. But I was constantly redoing things, and at some point you got to just kind of drive a stake in the ground and say, this is what I'm doing on this layout, and or you're never going to get anything accomplished.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. So I think that's gonna pretty much close out our session this evening with Marty McGurik. I wanna thank the section crew again for sticking out with us here past the 2.5 hour mark. Well done, great questions, great interaction, and thank you, Marty, for fielding the questions this evening as well. I appreciate that. Mike, any closing comments before we tie down for tonight?
No, I tell you what, Marty, thank you for coming on. I learned a lot tonight. A lot about the Central Vermont. I mean, that's what is it? The pregnant worm. What did you say?
Pregnant tapeworm.
The pregnant
tapeworm. The pregnant tapeworm. Yeah, that's like if I see a CV boxcar at work now, that's all just bust out laughing now. But it's the approaches that you took to how you are building this are really, really kind of neat. And I never thought about doing that IKEA stuff. That's pretty sweet, actually. That's a good idea. What's your deck height? What is before we go? What is your layout height?
I think the top of the IKEA shelves, I think, are 48 inches or 49 inches. So then when you add the 1x3 on top of that and the plywood and stuff and the styrofoam, etc., it adds. It's right at 51 inches.
Oh, right at 51. Oh, that's a really good height. So
yeah. The one thing I didn't do that I should have done with that is they make legs that are really high, like, and they're set up to be like 4 or 5 shelves. And what you could do with those is build the shelves and then chop off the legs at your layout height, and now you have a support for a backdrop kind of built in.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Yeah. And I didn't do that because I just wanted to use the walls. I didn't want to have a artificial, horizon line above my head.
Yeah.
It meant I had to paint, 6 feet of sky above the layout, but it is what it is. But if you were dealing with it as something that you wanted to be more self-contained, or even if you were putting it into a room that didn't have finished walls, then you could do that. That's a pretty easy way to mount the backdrop.
Yeah, that's
Let the
cool.
Swedes do it for you.
Right.
There you go.
Well, but thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, and
yeah, it was an entertaining time this evening, and I certainly learned something.
Just so gauges.
Yeah, and then I think this one's for the road. This is going to end it.
Yeah,
Marty,
this is it.
This is it. So another Model Railroad podcast.
Actually,
if you haven't checked them out, Model Rail Radio, very good show.
That was one of my. We had just to give some background to people real quick. We had an operating session, and my folks were upstairs at the time, and this guy showed up like 2 hours late for the operating session, and walked in with a basically he had stopped at the grocery store and bought a bag of bread, or brought it with him, and he walked in and he came in, and then he asked if we had any peanut butter. We just walked in and asked. I think he asked. My mom and my wife were upstairs, and I think he just asked them, like, he walked in the door and said, "Hi, I'm here for the operating session, but I'm really hungry. The other guys wouldn't stop. They wanted to go to see Lance Mindheim's layout. Can you get me some peanut butter?" And so my mother was a little shocked by it, but she got him peanut butter, and then he asked her to fetch him something to drink.
Oh heavens!
Oh my good Lord!
At which point he almost got he was wearing the peanut butter, but
oh man,
the truth of the matter is I can't stand peanut butter.
No,
I don't eat it. I hate it. I
Oh,
can't. The only time I eat it is when it's in Reese's peanut butter cups.
Oh,
so
there you go.
Yeah,
That's
and I
good
have to
stuff.
give the dog her pills. She has to take her pills, and so we have this really old basset hound, and the only way she'll take her pills is if I put it in a lump of peanut butter on my finger, and she'll lick it right off my finger, and then it just grosses me out.
There you go. We've got, what is it? The Schnibble, the Junke, and now the peanut butter story. Those are the real takeaways from this evening.
Real takeaways. That's what you really want.
That's what we're really here for. Thanks, Tom. For that.
The Schnibble thing is going to be, that's going to go on. That's a shirt right there.
That's a shirt and the Junk Awards or the Junke. This is now a thing. So anyways, Marty, I got to say thank you so much. You've been a inspiration for me for a long time since I got back into model railroading. So it's been a real treat for me to have you on the show here. Getting to sit down and talk with one of the people that have helped me through your blog and through your articles and stuff like that, get to the place where I'm at. So thank you.
I'm sure. I've enjoyed it, guys. I really had a great time.
So, you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, welcome back anytime.
Especially when you get that paper, when you start working on that paper mill.
Yeah,
I'm really trying to Tom Sawyer that, and I'm trying to convince Bernie Kempinski that he really wants to build a paper mill.
Yeah, very good.
What you do is you say, Bernie, now how would you do this tower? How would you laser cut? Why don't you do it and show me how you would play? That's what you got to do. See.
Yeah, we have a really fun bunch out here that really we kind of drive each other all the time, but it's we razz each other a lot, and so it's
friends like these. Who needs enemies, right?
That's right.
There you go. All right, gang. So we're going to tie down for tonight. On behalf of Marty, Mike, and myself, thank you again. And we're going to be back next week with Mike Rose. Take care, folks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.